Good morning, or what's left of it. It's almost noon now. Um, yes, I went to the Kouri Richins detention hearing yesterday, and I was expecting it to be something short, maybe half hour, maybe an hour long, and no, it the feed from Law and Crime says 3 hours and 45 minutes. So it was the family lawyer was interviewed on News Nation. He happens to be my old paralegal school teacher, and I saw him at the hearing yesterday. And he said it was more like a little mini preliminary hearing. They were presenting witnesses and cross-examining, and I think they tried to present some evidence. Now, there was this was the courthouse where the Gwyneth Paltrow ski accident trial took place, and so we already know that they had an openness to the media live streaming, and so the media was there in force. They didn't allow a live stream. That's not to say one didn't happen. Court TV was live streaming, and they got discovered, and the judge asked counsel to approach, and then they kicked everybody out of the courtroom while they talked to the offending party. It was some detective work that I did that discovered who it was. At first, I thought it was KSL Television, but no, it was not. So there was a seating, or there's a capacity in the courtroom for 85 people, and there was a huge line, and I would have gotten there sooner, but there is no stoplight at the freeway exit where you get off to go to the courthouse, and it was rush hour, and it must have taken 15 minutes to get off of the freeway exit and headed over towards the courthouse. So next time there's a rush hour time start, I know to leave earlier, because there is no way to get around that. I tried looking for other routes, and there may be some obscure frontage road, but I couldn't discover it on Google Maps. But anyway, you live and you learn. So I got there, and we were handed like a 20-page packet of rules for media, rules for governing what's acceptable and not in the courtroom, and so forth. And credentialed media people were supposed to sign some agreement. Going, well, according to one term of on some of the paperwork, technically I qualify, but not really. So anyway, I need to see about getting credentialed so that maybe I can record the next James Brenner hearing, because Nate Eaton is going to be in Idaho Falls doing the Lori Daybell sentencing that day. And so he asked if I could update him on what happens with the next James Brenner hearing. So we all came in, and we're standing around in the lobby of the courthouse, and there's a lot of people, and they have some rows reserved for the family. They've got some reserved seating. I don't know how people get reserved, and I'll probably have to check on that in the future. and I was towards the back of the crowd, and so they finally open the door and start going in, and right after I passed through the little entry area into the courtroom, they cut people off right after uh, me and a few others came in. But there wasn't enough room in the court, so I ended up having to spend the first hour or so out in the foyer. But that wasn't a complete loss because I met an author. The author's husband, who was there to observe for his wife, and she's going to be writing a book on the case. She is currently working on one on the Gabby Petito case, and she wrote 2 volumes on the Murdaugh case called Murdaugh, she wrote, and and also talking to a bail bondsman who was waiting to see if he had some business to transact, and so that was really interesting getting to talk to them. And the author's husband had some interesting things to say. He was saying, though, that the mega mansion was never intended to be flipped, that it was intended for her and her lover to live in. But that doesn't seem to hold up with a news story that I watched in their early morning, which says that she put it back on the market like 2 weeks later. So I'm not sure if he's got accurate information on that. So anyway, I'm not sure if people know about the Kouri Richins case. So I thought would start with, let's see. Let's see, make sure I've got this before I close that. I've made a little playlist. We'll start with I wanted just an overview of the case that's brief so that people can know. Let's see. Okay, let me start. Get this queued up. Oops. Okay. Oh. Okay. Now I just need to share it, and we'll go through Dr. Grande's synopsis, and then we'll get into the trial. So, or the hearing. Let's see. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Kouri Richins? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the alleged crime, then offer my analysis. Kouri Darden Richins was born on April 20, 1990. She earned a master's degree from Utah State University and became a licensed real estate agent. It appears as though she was involved in flipping houses as well. In 2022, Kouri lived in Kamas, Utah, which is about an hour east of Salt Lake City. She lived there with her husband, Eric, of 9 years, and their 3 sons, ages 9, 7, and 5. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, so he was about 8 years older than Kouri. He had graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in international studies. He was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and had spent 2 years on a mission to Mexico City. Eric owned a masonry business and was quite successful. His net worth was about $3.6 million. Now moving to the timeline of the alleged crime. On March 4, 2022, at 3:22 a.m., Kouri Richins called 911 and reported that her husband was unresponsive. When the police arrived, they found that the Richins house was occupied by Eric, Kouri, and their 3 sons. The police discovered Eric Richins dead on the floor at the foot of his bed. They interviewed his wife, Kouri. Here's what she told them. At about 9 p.m. on March 3, so a little more than 6 hours earlier, Kouri and her husband were consuming alcohol to celebrate closing on a house related to Kouri's business. In the kitchen, Kouri prepared Eric a drink called the Moscow Mule, which is a cocktail made of vodka, ginger beer, and lime juice. She brought the drink to the bedroom and Eric consumed it as he was in bed. Kouri went to bed, but shortly after this, climbed out of bed and went to the bedroom of one of her sons. She decided to sleep in that room with her son because he was having night terrors. Kouri woke up at about 3 a.m. and went back into the bedroom where her husband was. She realized that Eric was cold to the touch and called 911. Here's what the police found during the course of their investigation. The medical examiner determined that Eric died from a lethal dose of fentanyl. He had about 5 times the lethal dosage in his system. The route of administration was oral. The fentanyl was not medical grade, rather, it was consistent with illicit fentanyl. When the police learned about this, they obtained a warrant for Kouri's residence. They seized her cell phone and several computers. Kouri said that she had left her cell phone. Kouri was supposedly in her son's room. Her phone moved, had been locked and unlocked several times, and sent and received messages, which had been deleted. The police found communications between Kouri and a drug dealer they identified as CL. The police interviewed the drug dealer in May of 2023. CL indicated that Kouri had sent text messages asking for prescription pain medication. This was sometime between December 2021 and February 2022. Ostensibly, the medication was for an investor who had a back injury. CL managed to obtain hydrocodone and dropped it off at a house in Midway, Utah that Kouri was flipping. Kouri had left cash for CL at the house. About 2 weeks later, Kouri once again contacted CL. This time she requested something stronger and asked for, quote, some of the Michael Jackson stuff, unquote. It would appear as though Kouri was trying to get her hands on propofol, but CL obtained fentanyl instead. On February 11, 2022, Kouri paid CL $900 for 15 to 30 fentanyl pills. On February 14, Valentine's Day, Kouri and Eric had dinner at their home. Eric took one bite of a sandwich that his wife bought him and broke into hives and couldn't breathe. He used an EpiPen and took Benadryl before passing out. When he woke up, he immediately called his business partner about the incident. Eric said that he thought his wife was trying to poison him. About 2 weeks after this incident, Kouri once again contacted CL and ordered another $900 worth of fentanyl pills. CL left the pills at the house in Midway where Kouri had left cash. Eric died of a fentanyl overdose 6 days later. As the investigation into Eric's death continued, Kouri wrote a book designed to help children deal with the grief of losing a parent. I will talk more about this in the analysis. In May of 2023, Kouri Richins was charged with first-degree aggravated murder and 3 counts of second-degree possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. For the murder charge alone, she is facing 25 years to life in prison if convicted. Now moving to my analysis. At the time making this video, Kouri technically maintains the presumption of innocence. However, the police believe that she is guilty, and so do many other people. Let's take a look at the factors both for and against the idea that Kouri Richins is guilty of murder, starting with the inculpatory factors. Kouri's husband Eric died of a fentanyl overdose. She claimed that she conducted CPR, but first responders said it did not appear that way. Kouri had purchased fentanyl from a drug dealer on 2 occasions prior to Eric's death. Eric became sick not long after Kouri purchased fentanyl the first time and died just 6 days after she purchased it the second time. Kouri mentioned to the drug dealer that she wanted the same drug that caused the death of Michael Jackson. Why was she requesting a drug associated with a fatality if her plans for the drug were recreational or for pain relief? Kouri admitted to the police that she prepared an alcoholic beverage for Eric in the kitchen and brought it to him in the bedroom. He drank it in bed and died not long after this. According to one of Eric's sisters, another poisoning incident happened years earlier when Eric was on a trip to Greece with Kouri. Eric told his sister that Kouri gave him an alcoholic beverage, which caused him to become violently ill. He said that he believed Kouri had tried to kill him. Kouri told the police that she left her cell phone in her bedroom when she walked to her son's bedroom, but the phone was used during that time. Eric told his friends that if anything happened to him, Kouri was responsible. Several of Eric's family members told investigators that they believed Kouri was involved in Eric's death. In January 2022, about 3 months before Eric died, Kouri updated Eric's life insurance policy to make herself the sole beneficiary. The insurance company notified Eric and his business partner, and they changed the policy back to the way it was. Sometime before Eric's death, he removed his wife from his will and life insurance and told people he did this because he thought his wife might kill him for the money. Eric was looking into getting a divorce and was concerned about how his children would be cared for. Right before Eric died, he had been arguing with his wife about a 22,000 square foot mansion that she wanted to purchase for about $2 million. The idea here was to flip the property. Kouri said that they were celebrating closing on that property the night Eric died, but family members said that Eric was going to tell Kouri that they were not going to buy the mansion. The day after Eric died, Kouri signed the closing papers for that mansion. That same day, she hosted a party where she consumed alcohol and allegedly assaulted her sister-in-law. Eric's estate was worth about $3.6 million, which could have been a motive for murder. Moving to the exculpatory factors, it is possible that Eric consumed the fentanyl on purpose. Maybe Kouri purchased the drug at his request. Eric believed that his wife was trying to poison him. Why would he drink anything that she handed him? Could anyone really be that reckless? Perhaps Eric repeatedly placed suspicion on his wife because he knew someday he would overdose, and he didn't want people to think less of him. Maybe Eric was mad at his wife and overdosed in a way that would make her look guilty, like he was trying to frame her for murder. That could explain the phone being moved. Maybe he was the one who did that. When considering all the evidence, do I think that Kouri Richins is guilty? Yes, I believe she's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt based on the evidence available right now. But again, she enjoys the presumption of innocence. Who knows what evidence may come out later? Moving to the next section, as I mentioned, Kouri wrote a book designed to help children cope with grief. It was self-published on March 7, 2023, just over a year after Kouri allegedly murdered her husband. The 41-page book is titled, Are You With Me? It is about a boy who lost his father. The boy wonders if his father is still around in some other form, I guess like a ghost. He wonders if his father will still show up at various events like his birthday, Christmas, and his first day of school. In the book, the father reassures the boy that he will be there for all those special occasions, following him around and watching him. The book is kind of a mixture of a heartwarming story about grief and a horror involving an unstoppable supernatural stalker. One could argue it's an unusual genre combination. Kouri's book was dedicated to, quote, my amazing husband and a wonderful father. I guess there wasn't room in the dedication to add the words murder victim. A few weeks after the self-publication, Kouri appeared on a Salt Lake City TV show called Good Things Utah and promoted her book. She talked about how her husband died unexpectedly, and she was shocked. Kouri said, quote, "I'm new to this," unquote, when referring to life without her husband. The idea for the book came to Kouri when she watched her sons struggle with their father's death. She wanted to find a book to help them cope, so she searched for one on Amazon. She couldn't find anything there, therefore she decided to write her own with input from her sons. Some might find this to be hard to believe considering there are millions of books on Amazon, but I think it makes sense. There probably aren't any books about a wife who kills her husband and then wants to help her children through the grieving process. Kouri is a pioneer in this new type of book about how to transition from killer to compassionate parent. Kouri talked about the 3 C's contained in her book: connection, continuity, and care. Connection was about her dead husband being present to his sons and comforting them. She said, "Dad is here in a different way." Knowing this brought her sons a lot of peace. They knew that they were never alone. Continuity was about maintaining a routine despite the death of the father, and care was about affirming when her sons were mad about their father's death. I have a feeling that Kouri is going to collect a lot of experience with this one. Kouri's book did not impress everyone who read it. One review talked about how it contained a lot of dark thoughts and pictures. Another review was even more scathing. The reviewer said that the book was heartwarming at first glance, but ultimately portrayed a creepy, haunting situation for children. When Kouri first released the book, free copies were available through a promotion, but it sounds like that was still a little bit too expensive. If Kouri is actually guilty, it makes sense that her book would be detached from normal emotions. Anyone who could kill a husband is probably self-centered, sadistic, lacks empathy, and has a sense of entitlement. These are not the best personality traits for writing a book about grief. Kouri appears to be on the creating grief side of the equation as opposed to the fixing grief side. Moving to my last item, why did Kouri write a book about grieving for a man she allegedly murdered? Kouri's alleged crime was about taking from someone else. She wanted everything that Eric had, all his money, all his property. When somebody has this mindset, nothing can ever satisfy their desires. I think it's possible that Kouri wanted more profit from her murder. She wanted not only the money, she wanted sympathy. She was ready to play the victim and gain attention. She put all that work in to commit the murder. It was so difficult, it took her a couple of times to get it right. She wanted everything she could gain from her effort. I think Kouri may have developed a new industry, the maximize your murder trend. I can imagine her starring in a commercial where she says, "Have you ever murdered somebody for money and thought to yourself, this is great and all, but I wish it was more rewarding emotionally? Well, keep listening because I have just the solution you're looking for." Now, moving to my final thoughts. Kouri appears to have backed herself into a corner, but there is still hope for her future. At the time of her arrest, she was planning on a sequel to her book titled Mom, How Far Away is Heaven? Well, for someone standing between Kouri and money, I'd say the answer is not too far. I think Kouri can still salvage this sequel. She just needs to modify the title a little bit. Perhaps something like, Mom, How Far Away is the Utah Department of Corrections Women's Prison? Those are my thoughts on the case of Kouri Richins. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.
The Camas man killed in a fence.
Can I have counsel for the state make their appearance, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Patricia Cassell for the state.
Your Honor, Brad Bloodworth for the state.
Joseph Hill on behalf of the state.
Margaret Olson.
Welcome. Thank you. On behalf of Ms. Richins, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Sky Lazaro on behalf of Ms. Richins.
Aaron Hinton on behalf of Ms. Richins.
Thank you. All right, we're here today for a detention hearing to determine whether Ms. Richins will continue to be held without bail during the pretrial period. I've read a lot of stuff. I've reviewed the defendant's motion to consider defendant's constitutional right to bail, the state's bench brief, defendant's motion to set conditions for release, the state's response, and I read your reply filed last evening, Ms. Lazaro.
Thank you. I apologize for that.
It's fine. This is a dynamic situation. I'd like to hear from the state first. Who's leading the
I
presentation?
am, Your Honor.
Ms. Cassell, how would you like to proceed?
Your Honor, we have 3 witnesses that we would like to call.
Okay.
We are prepared to call them now.
Who's the first witness?
The first witness is Detective O'Driscoll.
Do we have an exclusionary rule issue? I'm not sure it applies today, but I thought I'd ask.
I'm not sure it does either, given sort of the loose nature as far as the rules go on this hearing. Given the nature of the proceedings and I'm sure what's to come, extensive testimony in this case and a number of different issues, I would ask that it be imposed.
I mean, 1101C4 would say the rules of evidence do not apply today.
That is correct.
Exclusionary rules, a rule of evidence. Okay. It's a reasonable request, but it's denied.
Thank you.
Is it Detective O'Driscoll?
Yes.
Okay. If you'd step in front of Brittany, we'll get you sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, subject to the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Good morning, Detective O'Driscoll. Can you please introduce yourself to the court and explain your relation to this case?
My name is Detective O'Driscoll. I've been with the Summit County Sheriff's Office for 7 years. I'm assigned to the Investigations Division. I was assigned to be the lead detective in this case in April of this year. This case is an active case and the investigation's ongoing.
Detective, what was the Sheriff's Office first involvement in this case?
On March 4th, 2022 at 3:22 hours, Summit County Dispatch received a 911 call regarding an unresponsive male in the Francis area.
Have you listened to that 911 call?
Yes,
Who placed that call?
the defendant, Kouri Richins.
In addition to saying that someone was unresponsive, did Ms. Richins, the defendant, identify who was unresponsive and anything else about that person's condition?
Yes, she stated that it was her husband, Eric Richins, that was unresponsive, that he was cold to the touch and not breathing.
Did EMS and police respond to that address?
Yes,
Is that the family home?
yes,
Was a portion of the police and EMS response captured on police body camera video?
yes, it was.
Have you reviewed that video?
Yes, I have.
On that video, what time does EMS pronounce Eric Richins dead?
03:58 hours on March 4th.
What, if anything else, does EMS say about how long he had been dead?
One of the EMS personnel made the comment that he had been dead a while.
Did the state medical examiner's office conduct an autopsy of Mr. Richins?
Yes, they did.
Have you reviewed the medical examiner's autopsy report
Yes,
and the toxicology report that's part of that?
yes.
What did the medical examiner identify as the cause of death?
Drug intoxication with the specific drug being fentanyl.
I'm going to now ask you, Detective, some questions about someone with the initial CL. Do you know who I'm talking about when I say CL?
Yes, I do.
Who is CL in relation to the defendant?
CL is an associate of the defendant. She cleaned houses for the defendant's business as well as her personal home at times.
Does CL have a criminal drug history?
Yes,
Is she under supervision in a different county, a county other than Summit County?
yes, she is.
And is that in relation to certain drug charges?
Yes,
Does the program, does the court program in which she's in monitor treatment and testing, et cetera?
Yes.
Do you know how CL is performing in that program?
Based on my interactions with CL, she is progressing through the stages of that program, and that her personal outlook on her recovery is optimistic.
Have you interviewed CL in connection with this case?
Yes.
Approximately how much time have you spent interviewing her?
Over the course of multiple interviews, several hours each, I would say upwards of 10 hours.
Was CL in custody when you interviewed her?
Yes, she was.
Was that interview captured on video and audio recording?
Yes.
What, if any, promises did you make regarding, or to CL regarding her cooperation with being interviewed?
CL was not made any specific promises, but at the outset of our interviews, we explained to her that her cooperation in our investigation would result in us working with the prosecutors that were responsible for the charges she was facing.
Did you express to CL the seriousness of this case as well as the charges she was facing?
Yes, we expressed to her the seriousness of the charges and the possible results of those charges. As well, we impressed upon her the importance or the value of her testimony in this case as it related to the charges that she was facing, and that her testimony or any information that she may have was more important to us.
Did you stress to CL that the information you were asking her about needed to be credible and verifiable?
Yes, we told her at the beginning of our interview that any information that she may have, we would need to corroborate in order for it to be of value to us.
Did CL cooperate with being interviewed?
Yes, she did.
Did CL know Eric Richins?
Yes, CL told us that during the time that she spent cleaning the Richins home, she got to know Eric, that she felt that he was a really good person. She liked him, and she was very saddened to hear that he had passed away.
Did there come a time when investigators executed a search warrant on CL's home?
Yes.
In executing that warrant, did you make any observations consistent with CL's testimony that she felt bad about Eric Richins' death?
Yes. Inside the home, we identified a bedroom that belonged to CL. In the bedroom, there was a mirror above a desk. On the mirror were taped or affixed several inspirational quotes that seemed to relate to her recovery and her drug court program. Amongst all those inspirational quotes was a newspaper clipping of Eric Richins' obituary.
Did you get the impression that part of the reason CL cooperated is because she felt bad for Eric Richins?
Yes, in fact, she said so many times in our interviews.
Detective, I want to turn now to what, if anything, CL told you about the defendant requesting that CL purchase fentanyl for the defendant. What did CL tell you?
In our interviews, CL told us that in early 2022, the defendant reached out to her either by phone call or text message requesting that she procure fentanyl for what the defendant reported was an investor who had a back injury.
And upon the defendant asking CL to get fentanyl, what did CL do?
CL told us that she reached out to an acquaintance of hers, acquaintance one, and requested that she introduce her to somebody that could sell her fentanyl.
Did acquaintance one introduce CL to someone that could sell CL fentanyl?
Yes, CL said that acquaintance one provided her with a phone number of another acquaintance, acquaintance two, who was someone that she knew could sell CL fentanyl.
And did CL say that she ultimately contacted acquaintance two?
Yes, she did.
What, if anything, did CL say about purchasing fentanyl from acquaintance 2?
CL told us that she contacted acquaintance 2 after receiving his phone number and asked to arrange to meet to purchase some fentanyl from him. She stated that sometime in February, she believed she met up with acquaintance 2 at a Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased from him 15 to 30 round green-blue pills, which she understood to be fentanyl.
Using phone records through the course of your interview with CL, were you ultimately able to narrow down on what that date was in February that CL purchased fentanyl from acquaintance 2 at the Maverick in Draper?
Yes, based on forensic evidence, we were able to determine that that date was February 11th, 2022.
What, if anything, did CL say about what she did with the fentanyl pills that she purchased from acquaintance 2?
CL told us that after purchasing the pills from acquaintance 2, she returned home to her house in Heber. She said that either later that night or the next day, the defendant met her in the driveway of that home and did a hand-to-hand exchange of pills for cash.
I'm going to turn now, Detective, to some questions regarding witnesses who corroborate CL's testimony, okay?
Okay.
You mentioned acquaintance number 1. Have investigators interviewed acquaintance 1?
Yes.
Have you reviewed body camera, audio, and video of that interview?
Yes.
Does acquaintance 1 corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes. She stated that CL contacted her in early 2022 and asked for someone that could sell her fentanyl. In the body cam, she also retrieves her cell phone and shows investigators the messages that corroborated that.
And what kind of messages were they?
They were messages between acquaintance 1 and CL on Facebook Messenger app.
And have you reviewed those messages?
Yes.
Is the first of those messages dated February 6, 2022 at 1:37 p.m.?
Yes.
Does it read, text me, I've got a question, won't do it on this?
Yes.
And that's CL writing acquaintance 1, asking acquaintance 1 to text CL because she didn't want to write over Facebook Messenger?
Correct.
Did acquaintance 1 say whether or not she ever, in response, contacted CL?
Yes. She said that she then either texted or called her subsequent to her request.
You testified that acquaintance 2 sold fentanyl pills to CL at the Maverick in Draper. Have investigators interviewed acquaintance 2?
Yes.
Have you reviewed body camera, audio, and video of that interview?
Yes, I have.
Is acquaintance 2 able to corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes, acquaintance 2 was able to recall that he sold fentanyl pills to a friend of acquaintance 1's in early 2022 at a Maverick gas station in Draper.
I'm going to turn now, Detective, to some forensic data questions and whether forensic data corroborates CL's narrative, okay?
Okay.
Have you reviewed carrier records of the defendant's phone?
Yes.
And I want to just clarify one thing. I'm talking right now about carrier records, different than cell data records. We'll have an expert testify about cell data records in a moment. I'm just going to ask you about the carrier records, okay?
Okay.
What, if anything, do the carrier records for the defendant's phone, or what, if anything, in the carrier records for defendant's phone corroborate CL's testimony?
The cell records from the defendant's phone show several phone calls back and forth between her and CL in early 2022.
Do they show any text messages back and forth between the defendant and CL?
Yes, several.
Have you reviewed those text messages?
We were only able to see the timestamps and who the sender and receiver was. We're not able to see the content of those messages because they appear to be deleted from both the defendant's phone and CL's phone.
Have you reviewed the call history and carrier records of CL's phone?
Yes.
Does CL's carrier records and call history corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes.
Is there a particular set of calls on February 11th, 2022 between 5:19 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. in CL's phone history?
Yes.
Question CL regarding those calls.
Yes. She said those calls were to acquaintance two and that they were to arrange the specific date and time to pick up fentanyl in Draper.
Turning now from CL's purchasing fentanyl for the defendant to the defendant's purported timeline on the night of Eric Richins' death, okay?
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that police interactions with the defendant were captured on video. Have you reviewed that video?
Yes, I have.
Did the defendant provide police with a written statement in the early morning of March 4th, 2022?
Yes, she did.
Have you reviewed that statement?
Yes.
What on the early morning of Eric Richins' death did the defendant report had happened that evening?
She stated that the last time that she saw Eric alive was between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m. She stated that before going to bed, they had had a drink together to celebrate closing on a house for her business. She said that they got in bed between 9:30 and 9:45, and that shortly after getting into bed, one of the children had a nightmare, and that the defendant got out of bed and went to be with that child in their bedroom and slept in that bedroom until 3 a.m. or around 3 a.m. when she woke. She stated she returned to her own bedroom, got into bed, and felt that Eric was cold to the touch. She stated that she turned the light on, saw that he wasn't breathing and that he didn't look normal, and that she then called 911.
Did the defendant say whether anyone else was in their home other than the defendant, her husband Eric Richins, and their 3 young children?
No, she stated no one else was in the home.
Turning now to the defendant's statements regarding whether she performed CPR on her husband, okay?
Okay.
Did the defendant tell investigators when they arrived at her home shortly after she called 911 whether or not she performed CPR on Eric Richins?
Yes, she reported that she did.
I'm going to refer to someone now as defendant's best friend. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
What, if anything, did the defendant tell her best friend regarding whether she performed CPR on Eric Richins?
Investigators found text messages between the defendant and her best friend that was her explanation to her friend that she conducted CPR on Eric prior to EMS arrival.
And do those text messages read, "I pumped so damn hard, so hard, screaming at him to come back to life"?
Yes.
You testified earlier, Detective, that EMS responded. Have you interviewed the first EMS responder?
Yes, I have.
What observations did that EMS responder make?
They told me that when they arrived, they began CPR compressions on Eric, and that upon beginning those compressions, Eric began to foam at the mouth. He stated that observation indicated that CPR was not likely conducted before he arrived.
Detective, as part of your investigation, did you look into whether Eric Richins used illicit drugs?
Yes.
What did you determine?
Based on the interviews that we conducted with those who knew Eric well, all stated that he did not use illicit drugs other than consuming THC gummies on occasion.
Those that you spoke to include Eric's two best friends that he's known since high school?
Yes, both made the same statement that they never knew Eric to use any illicit substances other than the THC gummies.
When I reference a hunting guide in Mexico by the initials TR, do you know who I'm referring to?
Yes.
Did you speak to this hunting guide?
Other Summit County detectives did, yes.
And what did this hunting guide, if anything, say about Eric Richins using illicit drugs while hunting in Mexico?
The guide told detectives that several of their clients, when they come to Mexico, will seek out someone that can put them in contact with illicit substances while they are down there for their hunt. He stated that Eric Richins was not one of these, that Eric was solely focused on the hunt.
Has the defendant made any statements regarding whether her husband, Eric Richins, used illicit drugs other than THC?
Yes, in several statements made by the defendant throughout the investigation, there have been at least 10 times that she has said that Eric does not use illicit substances and did not use illicit substances.
And just to be clear, other than THC?
Other than the THC gummies, correct.
On the night Eric Richins died, did investigators search the Richins home?
Yes.
Did they find any illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find any paraphernalia or packaging or other evidence of illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find fentanyl anywhere in the home?
Only that which was in Eric's body.
We're going to now shift, Detective, from the night of Eric's death to a second drug buy initiated before his death and concluded after his death, okay?
Okay.
What, if anything, did CL tell you about the defendant approaching CL a second time for fentanyl?
CL told us that approximately a week after delivering fentanyl, the defendant reached out to her again by text or call and said that she wanted some more fentanyl that was stronger than the previous batch.
And in response, what, if anything, did CL do?
CL told us that she again reached out to acquaintance 1 because she had lost the phone number for acquaintance 2 and again requested from acquaintance 1 that she provide her with the phone number for acquaintance 2. She also made other statements in Facebook messages regarding that request.
In your interview, or detective's interview rather, with acquaintance 1, did she corroborate that indeed CL reached back out to her asking for acquaintance 2's phone number?
Yes, in the same Facebook Messenger, it showed the 2 different contacts on the 2 different dates.
And does the second Facebook message, was it dated February 25th, 2022 at 9:40 p.m.?
Yes.
And does it read, I need those again, but more, and I don't got a ride, I lost your friend's number?
Correct.
Did CL and acquaintance 1 both say that acquaintance 1 provided CL with acquaintance 2's phone number again?
Yes.
What then, if anything, did CL do with acquaintance two's phone number the second time?
CL told us that she again contacted acquaintance 2 and arranged again to meet up at the same Maverick gas station in Draper to purchase again 15 to 30, this time blue round pills that she understood to be fentanyl.
Between, on the way to the Draper and Maverick, the second time, when she purchased 15, I'm sorry, did you say 15 to 30? What,
Yes, 15 to 30 pills.
which she believed to be fentanyl. Did she make any stops along the way?
Yes, CL told us that the second time that she procured fentanyl for the defendant, she did not have a vehicle to drive on that date. She said that she reached out to a friend, acquaintance 3, and asked that he give her a ride to go purchase fentanyl. She said that he did pick her up, that they traveled from Heber City to the defendant's home in Francis, where, according to CL, the defendant had told her there was a check waiting under the mat at the defendant's home. She said that she checked under the mat and didn't find a check. And so she knocked on the defendant's door, and the defendant came to the door and wrote her a check from her business, from the defendant's business, for $1,300 for the purchase of the fentanyl. CL told us that afterwards they drove to the America First Credit Union in Heber City, where CL banks, and cashed the check and deposited $300 of it into her account at America First Credit Union. She said that after stopping at the bank and getting the cash, they then drove to the Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased the pills from acquaintance 2.
Did investigators execute a warrant at the America First Credit Union in Heber?
Yes, and that warrant returned a copy of the check written from the defendant's business account in the name of CL, and a receipt that shows that it was cashed and that $300 were deposited into CL's account.
And then CL ultimately, being driven by acquaintance 3, went to the Maverick in Draper and purchased fentanyl a second time from acquaintance 2.
Correct.
What, if anything, does acquaintance 2 say that corroborates CL's testimony?
Acquaintance 2 in his interview stated that he remembered selling fentanyl to a friend of acquaintance 1's on 2 separate occasions at the same Maverick gas station in Draper. He also said that he remembered the second time that he sold her the pills, that CL was with another person who matched the age and gender of acquaintance 3.
Have you interviewed acquaintance 3?
Yes.
What, if anything, does acquaintance 3 say to corroborate CL's testimony?
Acquaintance 3 corroborated all the same details that CL told us about that day, and in fact showed us text messages on his phone that also corroborated that story.
Detective, I'm going to ask you now some questions about what are commonly known as bug-out bags, okay?
Okay.
Did investigators execute several search warrants on the defendant's home or the family home?
Yes.
Did those warrants identify what are commonly known as bug-out bags?
Yes. There were several duffel bags stored in the garage, along with backpack-sized day packs, and each was identical and labeled for a different member of the Richins family. Those backpacks were seized subject to a warrant and were inventoried and photographed. Inside the bags, detectives located several items that would be useful in an emergency situation. But the most interesting were documents needed for travel for each member of the family. Each bag contained a photocopy of a state-issued ID in the children's case, along with passports for Eric and the defendant, as well as global entry travel cards for both Eric and the defendant.
Did those bags also contain clothing, toiletries, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Do detectives know when those bags were packed?
No.
And there was a bag for Eric as well, is that right?
Correct.
I have no further questions for you. Mr. Lazar on mine. Thank you.
Detective, it's O'Driscoll, right?
Correct.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to follow a little bit the same timeline just so we kind of keep things together. You said you reviewed the body cam that was provided on the night that Eric passed away, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that Kouri made a statement that night to police, a written statement.
Correct.
Okay. And she told them that she had made a drink, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they were aware of that. Was there anything in that body cam or investigation that talks about them looking for a glass that a drink had been made in?
No.
Okay. But you said that they searched for illicit drugs, correct?
I don't know if they searched for illicit drugs, but they searched the home.
Okay, so they searched the home that night knowing that he had a drink right before he went to bed and made no note that they had recovered glasses, looked for glasses, anything along those lines, correct?
Not to my understanding.
You also testified that when you interviewed CL, she was working on both a personal and I'm going to say professional capacity for Kouri, correct?
Correct.
And she was cleaning houses, that she was both cleaning Kouri's personal home and then she would clean homes that were investment properties, correct?
CL told us that she cleaned both homes for Miss Richins' business as well as at another time frame she cleaned their personal home.
Okay.
So not necessarily at the same time.
But at the time, she was cleaning homes for the business, correct?
Which time are you referring to?
On or about the time leading up to or during your investigation, end of the year, end of 2021, beginning of 2022?
At that time, from my understanding, what CL told us, she was cleaning only investment properties belonging to the Richins Realty Company.
And she was getting compensated for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so the check that you issued the search warrant on for the bank, that was written from Kouri's business account, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it could very well be that Kouri was paying her for cleaning houses, correct?
I don't want to speculate, but
It could be,
it's
despite
possible.
what CL said, correct? Okay. You also testified that CL was progressing through her drug court program and you were optimistic about how she would do in it, correct?
No, I testified that she was optimistic about her own personal
Sorry if I
recovery.
misstated that. How long were you investigating CL? When did you begin investigating CL?
I don't know an exact date, but the beginning of 2023.
Okay. And were you monitoring what she was doing at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Because you knew she had a boyfriend or this guy in Vegas, some other details about her life, correct?
Set of investigating CL, no, we didn't know all those details.
But over the course of your investigation, you learned them.
Correct.
Did you have CL's phone?
Summit County Sheriff's Office evidence text too.
But you've reviewed it.
Yes,
And you testified about text messages between CL and the defendant on or about this time period you're looking at in February, correct?
correct.
Did you review any other information prior to that time about contact that CL and the defendant had had?
I'm unsure,
Did you even
but
look?
it's possible that we looked into communications. In this investigation, initial stages, we looked into communications with everybody that the defendant had been communicating with.
Okay. But you don't recall, or you didn't look for a pattern of communication between CL and the defendant, is that correct? You were focused on February?
I guess that depends on what stages of the investigation you're talking about.
I'm talking about any of them. Did you ever look and see if CL and the defendant texted each other about anything on a regular basis?
Yes.
Okay. And how far back did those go?
I'm not sure on exact dates again, but into 2021.
Okay. So for a period of time, because CL is working for the defendant, there's communication, correct?
Correct.
And nowhere in the communication between CL and defendant, text messages asking for drugs, correct?
We didn't find any, but there were also time frames in the phones when
Okay.
we looked at them.
Now, I want to also talk about, you said you didn't make any promises.
Correct. No specific promises.
Okay. You did, however, tell her, let me back up. When was the first interview you had with CL?
I believe it was April 28th or 26th. I believe it was the 26th.
Did you have any contact with her prior to that?
No,
Did anybody from law enforcement have contact with her prior to that?
not from our office.
You don't know if anyone else talked to her?
I don't.
Okay. Now, part of this came out of a raid or something along the lines that was coordinated with at least ATF and some other agencies, correct?
CL's home was subject to a search warrant based on information that we had gathered during our investigation into CL.
And that search warrant would essentially contradict that she was doing well in what she was supposed to be doing in drug court, correct? She was buying drugs, wasn't she?
We didn't know that. We knew that she was associating with people that we knew had active warrants for drug charges.
Okay. And that would be a violation of drug court conditions, correct?
From my understanding, yes, but I don't know the details of that.
Okay. And as part of that search warrant, were individuals arrested?
CL was arrested, yes.
There were other individuals who were arrested too, correct?
I'm not recalling other individuals that were arrested on the date that the warrant was served.
Okay. Were any drugs recovered at the home?
Yes.
Okay. And you also recovered a firearm from CL's bedroom, correct?
Correct.
And that would be a violation of her drug court conditions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in this first interview in April, you begin the interview. Give me a moment here to find the right notes. by explaining to CL essentially how dire of a situation she's in, correct?
I don't have the interview memorized, but I know we talked about that, yes.
Okay, well, you told her that she was on probation to drug court for 4 first-degree felonies, correct?
Correct.
Okay, a violation of that is a potential prison sentence, correct?
It would depend on the prosecutor, but that's potentially true.
Okay, a first-degree felony carries a possible penalty of life in prison, correct?
I don't know. I would have to reference the code.
So you told her she was facing problems with that, correct? That
Correct.
this would be a violation. So she'd be on the hook for 4 first-degree felonies.
Potentially, yes.
And you also told her that having the firearm could potentially be a new crime, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you also told her that the U.S. Attorney's Office was essentially on board with screening drug distribution charges, correct? I'm happy to play it if you don't remember.
I don't remember specifically.
Do you remember talking to her about potential federal charges?
Yes.
Okay. So she was aware that not only was she facing multiple first-degree felony prison sentences, she was also potentially facing federal charges, correct?
Correct.
And during that initial interview, she tells you that she didn't buy fentanyl, correct?
I don't know if she made that specific statement, but she talked about not knowing anything about fentanyl.
Okay. And that interview lasted about an hour and 19 minutes, hour and 20 minutes, correct?
Correct.
And that interview ends well with you telling her, sometimes you tell her to think through all of this and let you know if she wants to help.
Yes, I gave her the opportunity to tell us up front whether she was willing to cooperate or if we should just not bother interviewing her anymore.
Okay. But this is after you essentially tell her that she has the potential of doing a considerable amount of state and federal prison time, potentially.
Yes, this is a common tactic in law enforcement to be able to leverage charges for information.
Okay. In fact, you did in this case leverage charges for information because you told her that you didn't care about first-degree felonies or federal charges. What you cared about was information about
I told her that I was interested in the information that she may know about this case.
Okay. But you told her also that Eric died of a fentanyl overdose, correct?
Correct.
And you told her that you thought that Kouri gave him the drugs, correct?
I did not specifically say that.
You alluded to the fact that you needed information about Kouri getting fentanyl because that's how Eric died, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific, but the information that we tried to convey to CL was that we wanted to know the information that she may have regarding Eric's death.
Okay. And you didn't care about any additional charges. All you cared about was that information, correct?
As I said previously, we expressed to her that the information that she may have was more valuable to us than seeking charges against her.
All right. And then you interview her 2 more times, is that right?
No, there were, I believe, 3 more after our first one.
Okay. Were all of those audio and video recorded?
Yes.
And those were turned over to the state in this case, correct? The state being the prosecutor's office? Okay. Now, forgive me because with all these interviews, I'm not sure which one comes from which. You, in subsequent interviews, tell CL that she needs to give good enough details that will ensure that Kouri gets convicted of murder, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific statement, but I did express to her that the information that she gave us needed to be specific enough that we could corroborate it and that it could be presented to a courtroom.
Okay. And that she was, quote, screwed at this years if there's not cooperation, correct?
No, I never made such statement.
Okay. Did you ever tell her this was her get out of jail free card?
No, I did not.
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Now, at some point, CL tells you that in one of the interviews that Kouri contacted her between December and February to obtain prescription pills for an investor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And she doesn't specifically state fentanyl at that point, correct?
Are you referring to CL?
I'm referring to CL.
I don't remember, but I don't believe so.
Okay. And in fact, I'm guessing it's something where on the second or third interview, CL says that those first pills, well, never says those first pills are fentanyl, correct? It never says that Kouri asked for fentanyl, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Sorry. In those first, in the first transaction, so initially CL tells you that there were 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
Yes, and what I have to say here is that
Well,
none
that was a yes or no question.
but none of the information that we got from CL was perfectly chronological. We had to piece it together over multiple interviews to come to the conclusion that we came to.
Because you told her you needed something more specific to ensure that Kouri gets convicted, right?
No, we told her that we needed more details on what she was talking about and specific dates and times.
But in the first one, she says there's 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
At some point in our interviews, she told us there were transactions.
And she says that Kouri was only looking for prescription pills or hydrocodone pills, to be specific, correct?
CL referred to them as Roxy's.
Okay, what do you know Roxy's to be?
They can be different things in the drug world. They can either be counterfeit pills that are meant to look like a prescription pill, or they can be actual prescription pills, but generally they're known to be opiate-based drugs, whether illicit or pharmaceutical.
Okay, so something along the lines of hydrocodone or Oxycontin or something along those lines, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And she specifically says that she was looking for $900 worth of fentanyl pills, correct?
I don't know if initially, but she did make the statement of $900 at one point in one of our interviews.
Okay. And she says that Kouri told her to leave the pills at an outdoor fire pit at the Midway house where there was cash, correct?
I don't know if she made that exact statement, but yes, she told us that at some point in part of the exchange that she was instructed to leave pills in an outdoor fire pit in a house in Midway.
And in fact, you sat there with her in this interview and did house searches, correct? Trying to figure out which house this was.
Yes.
Okay. Because she couldn't really tell you which house it was, correct?
She couldn't give us an address, but she was confident that she could find it if she could drive there.
Okay. And did you take her for a drive there?
Yes.
Did you ever do any follow-up investigation on whether or not that house ever sold?
Yes.
And you know that that house sold sometime in January of 2022, correct?
What I understand, yes.
So Ms. Richins no longer owned that home or occupied that home or had access to that home in February, correct?
I don't know.
Well, the house was owned by somebody else, right?
Again, I don't know.
Well, you said it closed in January of 2022.
From the information that I was told from other people, other investigators that had looked into that, I was told that Ms. Richins owned the house at some point and that it sold at some point. I don't know dates exactly.
Be important if CL's telling you that she had access to the home and was there in February?
Possibly.
That might be a good fact to know. Okay. CL then does subsequent interviews, correct?
Yes, we had multiple interviews with her.
And after being told that, as your words are, correct? She now says that it was specifically fentanyl that Kouri asked for, correct?
Correct.
And that she didn't actually take the pills to that house in Midway. It was a hand-to-hand transaction, correct?
Like I said, she went back and forth on her memory on which instances referred to which transactions. And ultimately, she told us that she was sure that the first transaction of fentanyl was a hand-to-hand transaction in her driveway.
Okay. And was what's been referred to as acquaintance 3, was that in regard to that transaction?
No.
Okay.
Was the second transaction.
Were you able to corroborate, was anyone with her that could corroborate that she saw CL hand Kouri drugs?
Not that I know of.
And then she states that now there was a third transaction that occurred after Eric's death, correct?
She didn't make the statement that it was after Eric's death, but she told us there were 3 total transactions.
So the information contained in the state's amended information, you don't know where that came from?
Which information are you referring
That
to?
she purchased drugs after Eric's death?
Yes, I do know where it came from.
Okay. And you're saying CL did not sell drugs to Kouri after Eric's death?
CL could not remember specific dates and did not make mention that the transaction happened after Eric's death. But when presented with digital evidence from other witnesses, she confirmed that that was most likely correct.
Okay. So she just agreed with your scenario of events, correct?
No, in fact, several times during our interview, she told us that as we presented her more information, it helped her remember more.
Okay. So as you're telling her to be more specific, you're providing her with information that you're
Find a better business anytime at bbb.org.
gaining in, and she's saying, now I remember. Accurate?
Yeah.
All right. You also testified that you interviewed 2 of Eric's best friends, right?
Yes.
And during one of those interviews, actually, I'm going to go back to CL for just a second. On this transaction that you allege that this check was used for, or the state alleges this check was used for, you testified that she picked up the check, there was and cashed it, right?
Correct.
And drove to the Maverick and purchased fentanyl.
She didn't drive, but she was.
Someone drove her, okay?
Yes.
And the person with her corroborates that.
Correct.
And that third witness never saw CL give those drugs to Kouri, correct? Acquaintance 3 never saw that?
Acquaintance 3 didn't tell us that he ever saw that, no.
Okay. In fact, there's no independent witness to corroborate that CL gave Ms. Kouri those drugs, correct?
No eyewitnesses that we have identified, but the investigation is ongoing.
And CL is currently out of custody, right?
Depends on your definition of custody, but she's not incarcerated, no.
Not incarcerated, she's on, I think, ankle monitor and not to leave the county, right?
Correct.
But following your interviews with her, she was released from jail.
Not immediately, no. She worked with the prosecutor in the other county where her drug court is and came to a resolution as to those charges against her. And part of that was being released on ankle monitor.
Okay, so in exchange for the testimony, in exchange for the information that she provided to you, and a deal was worked out where she was essentially released from jail on the order to show cause, correct?
I don't know the specifics of what went on between the prosecutor and CL.
Okay.
But subsequent to our interviews, we reached out to the prosecutor's office and let them know that she was being cooperative. After that, I was not involved in any decisions regarding her release.
Okay, because that's up to the judge and whatnot.
Correct.
But you did communicate that to prosecutors,
Yes,
that she gave you the information you needed.
that she was being cooperative with our investigation, yes.
All right, I want to turn now to your interview, and I'm going to use initials. Are you okay with that? You had an interview with one of Eric's friends. His initials are JS. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. That interview occurred about April 20th. Is that correct?
that seems right. I don't know a specific date, but
Okay. And during that interview, you discussed with him that he and another individual were essentially Eric's best friends, correct?
Ms. Lozera, my apologies.
Yes.
April 20th of which year?
Oh, 2023.
3.
I apologize.
Thank you.
At any point during that interview, did JS mention that Eric had said that at any point during he and Kouri's marriage, he was concerned that Kouri was attempting to poison him?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
In fact, you present him essentially 3 scenarios of what could have happened to Eric, correct? That he potentially did it to himself knowingly, that someone else did it to him, or that it was accidental, right? And you specifically ask him if he thinks Kouri would have done it, and he says, no, in my gut, I don't believe so, correct?
I don't know if that was a direct quote, but yes, he said that he didn't believe that she would have done it.
And he also states during that interview that at the time of his death, Eric and Kouri's marriage was in a really good place.
Yes.
Now, he also details or talks about a falling out that he and Eric had over the course of their friendship, correct?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
And that Eric and his other friend that he refers to in this interview actually had a falling out right before Eric passed away, correct?
Yes.
You also talk about, or he talks about the fact that of them at different times that had marital problems that they had helped each other through, correct?
JS told me that he and Eric and their other friend would confide in each other about their marriages and would share information, and that was how he had the insight that he had into Eric's life.
He also talks about that Eric changed or created these trust documents, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And his understanding, based on what he said that Eric told him, was because Eric was pissed or upset about a relationship that Kouri had, correct? Or he thought she had.
I don't remember the specifics of that part of the interview, but I do remember that JS was aware that Eric had made the trust.
And he doesn't specifically say anywhere in that interview that the trust was made because he was mad about this home equity loan, correct?
JS expressed to us that he understood that the reason that Eric created the trust was to ensure his son's well-being if anything were to happen to him.
And he also expresses to you that because you asked him why it wasn't changed back, or because the sister was made the trustee, correct? And
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
the
question.
sister, so in the, that was a terrible question. In those trust documents, the sister was made the trustee, correct?
From what I understand, yes.
And you asked JS specifically, or somewhere along the lines of, if they were doing so well, why would he have not changed that back? Right?
Yes.
Okay. And he tells you that it was his way of ensuring that even if they were doing well at the time, if there was a divorce, he would get the last word in it, right?
I remember him using that phrase, getting the last word, yes.
All right. Now, you also testified today about this hunt that took place down in Mexico, right? Correct? And this hunt was February of 2022, correct?
I don't know specific dates, but I'm aware that Eric was on a hunt in Mexico shortly before his death.
Okay. And JS tells you that he was really upset, actually leading in the days right before he passed away, about what had happened with this hunt, right?
Yes.
And he was upset that they had paid an outfitter for a number of permits that they believed the outfitter had procured, correct?
Yes, from what I'm recalling, he was upset about the outfitter or the guide had not gotten enough permits for the amount of animals that they ended up taking, and it caused some concerns over legal requirements of tagging animals.
Okay. And getting the cape or anything else, correct?
Correct.
And this is the same, is this outfitter the person that you investigated? Or that you interviewed?
Someone associated with that hunt and that outfit, yes. I'm not sure the exact association, but a contact for that outfitter.
Okay. So that outfitter was aware that they had made some serious problems, Eric, with regard to how many animals they took in Mexico, correct?
According to JS, yes.
And in your subsequent investigation, Eric had some heated conversations actually the night before he passed, or the night that he passed away, with that outfitter, correct?
We received information about that, yeah.
Okay. In fact, he was searching how far it was to drive from Scottsdale down there, correct?
Correct. Well, his phone showed that search.
Okay. And JS also told you that he had information or believed that this outfitter was somehow connected to the cartel, correct?
I don't recall. That sounds familiar, but I don't recall if those were the words that he used.
But essentially,
JS made a statement about the cartel when he was talking about Eric and that hunt, yes.
Okay.
Counsel, would you approach for a minute?
Yes.
Will you turn the white noise on? My apologies, 1 second.
Just a side note here, they called an unexpected recess because Court TV was streaming the hearing without permission.
You can hear first.
So,
Or, what's that? No, we're good.
oh, is that
We're
what
gonna break. Do
the
you mind cleaning
that noise
clearing
was?
the gallery first, and then we'll reverse the process on the way back. All right. So everybody has the yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, no, you're fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, I need to handle an issue with some members of the media that are live streaming without permission to do so. This is a good opportunity to take a restroom break. We're going to reverse the process we used on the way in. If the gallery would please follow the deputy's instructions, proceed orderly on the way out. I will let you stretch your legs. We'll come back in about 20 minutes. Thank you.
I was glad because there had been two people who came out, but we couldn't go in and look for a seat. And so this is when we three people out in the foyer got a chance to come in. So,
Hey, Chris.
let's check and see whether we have to speed up.
The word
Looks
is
like
Key
it,
TV
yeah,
and Court
okay.
TV are live
I'll
streaming.
let's listen to what they say.
I think they're live streaming it separately. I can clarify, but
So it sounds like more than one was live streaming it, and I thought that KSL
ABC4 has the signed order. Yeah, Key
was
TV and Court
streaming
TV.
as well as Court TV, so I think that would be the two. You can see folks in the jury box kind of feel like you're okay.
Counsel, you're okay to have a seat if you'd like.
Thank you.
If Ms. Richins would like to use the restroom, that's fine.
You see that little water bottle there that person has? It says TCU. It must be for me. Hmm. Yeah, and they weren't supposed to be live streaming. They were supposed to do it on a delayed basis, as I understand it. So, but I expect that in the future they'll probably do live streams because they've now made the request to do so, and you know, they were amenable to streaming the Gwyneth Paltrow ski accident trial. Fentanyl water. Oh, I hope not. Yeah, me too. It was really interesting talking to the bail bondsman and the author's husband out in the foyer, but you know, I wanted to hear the actual evidence, and up to this point, I haven't reviewed the footage so that it would be a surprise to me as well. Seeing it for the first time when we come back. Yeah, I have my little notebook that I was fiendishly trying to take pages and pages of notes and kind of failing miserably because it's just not possible and to write that fast. And I had a crappy pen that didn't have a very good
All right, thanks,
grip.
folks. If you want to take a moment and use the restroom, Ms. Richins, if you'd like to use the restroom, stretch your legs. This is
Okay, well, now that they're done talking, I'll speed it up through the rest of this. Yes, it was a lot. And I've never seen or heard about a detention hearing that took that long. I mean, the James Brenner federal detention discussion, you know, may have taken all of 15 minutes.
Are we all taking a break, Judge, or just?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Of course,
Okay.
he had court-appointed lawyers, and she's got high-paid ones. Okay,
What's your name?
Adrian?
Are you able to confirm whether or not you're
let's
allocating the ABC4 news stream or live streaming audio through WebEx?
Oh, no, we're not on the WebEx. We are plugged into the media room with everyone else.
Okay,
It's my understanding that
that's fine.
oh, okay.
Thank you for confirming.
Sure.
Okay. Chris, can you reach out to somebody from KUTV and confirm whether or not they're doing the same? Okay.
Okay, here we go.
I'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you.
When you realize a recipe is just one gift you can pass down, ask,
Just in
now
time
what?
for
Who's your
commercial
rock?
break. She's kind of done some mouth grooming, sticking her tongue out thing. That's generally an indication of stress and having a dry mouth, especially since nothing's been said that she could be finding distasteful. So she seems to be showing stress. Now, I counted 8 camera crews outside the courthouse when they were waiting to see the family come out. I know that all the local crews were there. Court TV, I think it seemed like there were more news ones than I actually saw cameras. So I think some of them didn't bother setting up the cameras outside. Yeah, she hasn't been crying. It's crumpled up for form's sake. So, now in an actual trial situation with the jury, she's not going to have those handcuffs on, or like Letitia Stock, where they're threatening to do handcuffs, but it would be under the table where they wouldn't be visible. So, yeah, this is very unusual because is it Amy, the sister? She is sitting right there behind the table, and normally in a courtroom, only people who have passed the bar and are actual lawyers get to sit on that side with the lawyers. And I don't know, is Amy a lawyer? Yeah. So I mean, I kind of think it's a bit of a silly rule, because I think that it helps for them to have investigators and so forth, and assistants there that they can ask questions quickly. So, okay, let's see. Do I recognize anybody coming in? Yeah, I know she was there to do that, but usually they sit in the gallery. So it was kind of unusual, unconventional. I don't think it's a bad thing. That's possible that it could have been space, because space was very limited, and I need to see about getting press credentials. Then I could have sat in the jury box, but I wouldn't have met Katie. Let's see. There was a documentary maker that I was talking to in line, and I haven't spotted him. Pretty tall. Now they're going to let in the general people. I'm not sure how they did reserved seating, because I didn't know they did that, but it's good to know. Nope, there I go. I'm in pink. Well, I knew they had 2 rows for family. I thought reserved seating was something else. Okay, I saw myself on camera wearing pink. Let's see, when I went to Marcos Ortiz funeral, I watched the stream of that later and saw myself, and I was wearing pink that day too. So I seem to like to wear pink. And Katie was sitting next to me and taking notes feverishly on her phone, and I wasn't sure if she was another podcaster. There was one lady I was talking to was in front of me who was writing an article. Not necessarily a reporter, but darn snail in lettuce. I think I'll pass on the snail in lettuce. No. My brother told me about eating snails when he was a missionary in France, and he thought they tasted like chewing rubber bands. Okay, let's see. Maybe we can speed this up a little. Okay. I think we can go forward a
In your
minute.
training and experience, if someone doesn't know how
Oh,
to do
too far.
Have a seat, please. All right, Detective, Ms. Lazaro, I apologize for that interruption. Please proceed.
no problem, I'm sure everyone appreciated it. Great.
And when I came in, I wasn't
Couple
sure
more
which
points I wanna
team of
ask some
lawyers was
questions
for
on.
whom.
There was some discussion during your testimony elicited by the state about CPR given when the night that Eric passed away, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you've reviewed the case file. Eric had a sheet on the floor at the foot of the bed, correct?
Correct.
And that was because when Kouri was on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, she was directed to remove him from the bed to the floor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the 911 dispatcher told her to attempt to conduct CPR, correct?
Correct.
Do you know if Kouri's certified in CPR?
I do not.
Okay. And for someone in your training and experience, if someone doesn't know how to do CPR, it's entirely try, it may not be effective.
Sure.
You also talked about what you refer to as bug out bags, correct?
Correct.
I'm not from Utah, but given the amount of time it's somewhat customary for people to prepare for things here, correct?
From my experience, yes.
So that would include like food storage, perhaps packing a bag, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of those bags was Eric's, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall a label with a date on that bag?
I don't recall a date, but I do recall from photographs seeing it labeled as Eric's, yes.
Okay. And did you said that there was identification documents in there, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that those are now expired?
No.
Okay. You came onto this case or when did you come onto this case?
In April of this year.
Okay. Took over as lead detective?
Yes.
And you, at some point after that, went to Kouri's home, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And introduced yourself and asked her, do you remember me? You coached my son, correct?
Correct.
And who was the other detective with you?
Sergeant Hoffmeyer.
Okay. And Sergeant Hoffmeyer said, hey, I know your best friend. She coached my son, correct? And presumably, because you are the lead detective, you knew she was represented at that time, correct?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, so you had reviewed the entire case file and did not know she had.
I had not reviewed the entire case file at the time that I approached Ms. Richins.
Okay.
I went to the house to introduce myself as the new detective so that she would know what was going on with the case.
Do you have any questions with the district attorney's office prior to you talking to her?
I do not think so.
Okay. Were you aware of a letter in the file that I had sent to, and specifically your office addressed the Summit County Sheriff, Mr. Martinez, that I was counsel in the case?
I was not aware of that letter at the time.
And you discussed with the case, correct?
After yes.
Did you ever ask her if she'd like a lawyer present?
Yes, at one point, her mother came to the house and made a point of should she be talking to us, and I said, if you would like to have your attorney here, I'm fine with that.
Okay, but this was after you'd been talking to her, right?
Mhm.
Are you, remind me the other detective's name again? I apologize.
Sergeant Hoffmeyer.
Hoffmeyer. Are you aware of a conversation between Sergeant Hoffmeyer and Kouri where she asked why Detective Woody was removed from the case and he tells her for mishandling?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Did he ever make mention of that?
On that date at that time, no, I don't believe so.
Okay. Was Detective Woody removed from the case?
She wasn't removed from the case. She could no longer fulfill those duties.
Okay, what is she doing now?
She's in patrol.
Traffic,
No, patrol.
patrol,
Yes.
as in like a
Responding
patrol?
to emergency calls, yeah.
Okay. But
She's
she
also
was,
part of the K-9 unit.
so she went from being the lead detective in a murder investigation potentially to patrol, correct?
That happened in our office.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bloodworth, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Within the scope of cross, please.
Detective, on cross-examination, Ms. Lazaro asked you about Ms. Richins' narrative from that night that she gave her husband a drink. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And she asked you about whether or not the police recovered a glass, a cup, a mug, some kind of container for that drink that evening. Remember that?
Yes.
Were there any glasses or containers near the defendant that evening?
On the evening of the death, is that what you're referring to?
Correct. I guess it's the morning of the 4th when police arrived.
Right. I'm unsure without being there on scene. But from reviewing the body.
Am I right that the only information that indeed Ms. Richins, Kouri Richins, the defendant, gave her husband Eric Richins a drink was the defendant's own words, right?
Yes.
Ms. Lazaro had asked you about gaps in timeframes in cell phones. Based on the carrier records, what have you been able to determine about gaps, particularly from early January until shortly after the defendant's?
We were able to determine from looking at the phone that it appeared that data from several different apps in the phone was missing in that time frame between January and just shortly after Eric Richins' death.
Let me turn now back to CL. The very first time you met with CL, you testified that you kind of laid out kind of the predicament she was in, facing serious charges, but having potentially valuable information regarding a very serious death investigation, right?
Correct.
After that first meeting, how long until you began questioning her about the drug purchases?
For 4 or 5 days.
So you laid everything out for her on the first meeting and then gave her 4 or 5 days to consider whether she should operate and then interviewed her substantively?
Correct.
Let me talk about that this. How long after Eric Richins' death are you now interviewing CL?
Over a year,
And
here in a couple months.
in order to judge, what, if anything, did you show her?
We showed her the contents of her phone that we seized from her home. We showed her applications, Google Maps, Google Earth. We showed her other witnesses' phones or screenshots of those phones.
And the other witnesses' phones or screenshots of those, you showed her screenshots of communications between her and that other witness
Correct.
with the idea that those communications might jog her memory?
Correct.
Is that kind of iterative approach of showing an interviewee information, is that common when you're interviewing somebody a year after the event which you're asking them to recall?
Yes, as from my experience, people have a difficulty recalling information, especially specific dates from that long ago.
Let me turn now to the April 13th, 2023 date when you introduced yourself to Ms. Richins, the defendant. What's the first thing the defendant did when you introduced yourself?
Oh,
And about how long did she talk?
3 hours.
She give any very excited to talk to you and surprised you taking so long to come talk to her?
Yeah, she made multiple statements that she was glad the investigators were there to talk to her because she felt that she hadn't been in contact with the sheriff's office very frequently before that day.
And did there come one or even several times towards the end of the interview when you said your goodbyes, tried to leave, and she continued to talk?
Yes.
The interview after you and Sergeant Hoffmeyer left, did she email Sergeant Hoffmeyer with some follow-up?
Yes, she sent an email with follow-up information and Sergeant.
I'm going to mark, if agreeable, as State's Exhibit 1, a transcript of that April 13, 2020 interview.
Ms. Lozaro, have you seen it?
No.
You got to show it to Ms. Lozaro first.
Your Honor, Your Honor, counsel has the audio of the interview. I did the audio.
Is that correct?
I believe so. There's a lot there. I
Okay.
haven't, but
All right.
we can proceed for today's purposes.
Your Honor, for purposes of today's hearing, the state would like to move this into evidence as Exhibit 1. The state asks that the court file it private at this point. We weren't sure this was going to come up today. We may need to redact some names from it before it goes public.
Yeah, we're not going to put it in the docket at all, but it can be admitted for as States 1 for the purposes of today's detention hearing.
Thank you, Your
All
Honor.
right.
Mr. Driscoll, you recall Ms. Lozaro asked you some questions about interviewing somebody with the initials JS. And it's approximately April the 20th, 2023, right?
Correct.
And at that point, how long had you been active on the investigation?
Less than 2 weeks.
And you told, I think you testified, you told JS something like you thought there were 3 alternatives. One was an accidental death, accidental overdose, suicide, or homicide. Is that right?
Correct.
At that point in your investigation, were you looking into and investigating all 3 of those alternatives?
Yes, at that time, I had little information about the case other than the couple of interviews that I had conducted, and I was trying to keep an open mind to all the possibilities.
Thank you. No further questions. We're good, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Lazar?
No.
You can step down, sir.
Thank you.
The state's.
Calls Chris Kotridemus.
Sir, if you'd step in front of Brittany, we'll get you sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, to the pains and penalties of perjury?
Sir, could you please and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Chris Kotridemus. Last name is Kotrodimos.
Thank you. Mr. Kotridemus, how are you employed at this point in time?
I own a private investigation firm,
What's that called?
M20 Solutions,
How long have you been the owner of that firm?
about 7 months.
What did you do prior to owning that business?
I was a police officer for over 23 years.
And where did you work as a
Worked with North Carolina, Utah, and took a position with Salt Lake City Police Department where I worked there. In 2017, I took a position with the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office on the homicide team there, and until my retirement in December of 2022.
Do you have any specialized training or experience with forensic digital evidence?
I do, yes.
Could you briefly explain what that is?
Sure. So I have, I've attended several formal courses, one being a Cellbrite Certified Operator course, Cellbrite Certified Physical Analyzer course. I've also attended a 40-hour cell phone and mapping course through ZX. After using those skills for several years, I also attended a ZX 40-hour subject matter expert course on the same subject, cell phone, social media mapping, those types of things. My experience related to my testimony and worked either directly or indirectly on more than 200 homicides and major crimes, inspected of phone and social and phone downloads.
Thank you. What is your role in the case that brings you to court today?
I was retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office to evaluate digital evidence in this case.
And what evidence have you reviewed?
I reviewed several cell phone downloads or extractions. I've reviewed and analyzed cell records and records, things like that.
Difference between carrier records and call data records are?
Yeah, so a call data record or a cell download is called is information that is downloaded from a phone onto some type of media, external drive, things like that. And it does so into a read in which you're able to analyze the data that's contained within a device, the cell phone extraction or download. A carrier record or detail record is the regular record that you would have. It's the usage of the carrier. So it records the date and times of your calls, your texts, your data usage for a given period of time. And it can include location information, such as like tower data.
Can discrepancies between carrier records and the data that's extracted from a device?
Yes.
What would cause that?
Usually, sometimes it's because it just wasn't captured in the phone download due to a software limitation, but typically where we see it is through deletion of information on the that does not match the carrier records that we receive from the phone company.
Forensic extractions of an iPhone belonging to the defendant that was seized April 13th of 2022?
I did.
Does it contain digital information pertaining to the night of March 3rd and into the morning of March 4th, 2022?
It does.
What does show? Well, let me ask you this. Time that that phone is used on March 3rd of 2022?
Activity reported on the defendant's phone is an activity device movement 2:33 hours or 10:33 p.m. on March 3rd.
When was the next time that that phone was used?
The phone was inactive and then ultimately unlocked at 3:07 a.m. on March 4th, 2022.
Was there anything that happened between those two timeframes?
On that device?
On
No.
that device?
No.
Does the extraction of that phone indicate it moved in that time frame?
It does.
And how are you able to tell that?
Through the download. In this case, we use Cellbrite for the download. In the download, it gives an activity, like a connected device activity movement. Usually that's an indicator of another connected device, such as a tablet, watch, or something of that nature. Those two devices will communicate with each other and report potential movement of the phone through that application.
Was there anything significant that occurred at 3:22 hours on March 4th?
At 3:22, yes, a 911 call was made.
So between the time that the phone is used at 3:07 that morning and 3:22, is there any activity that can be seen from the download?
There is.
What is that?
At 3:07, the device is unlocked. At 3:08 a.m., the device reports some type of movement, either the device itself or a connected device is moving. At 3:12, the phone was unlocked. At 3:16, the phone was unlocked again. At 3:19, the phone was unlocked again, potentially twice. There was movement again at 3:21, and then at 3:22, the 911.
So roughly a time frame of 15 minutes between the first used and the time that a 911 call is placed.
Correct.
Now, the attached device that's recording movement, could that be an Apple Watch?
It could be.
Do you have any way of telling from the extraction you examined what that device was that was recording that movement?
So far in the extraction, I have not been able to. I may at some point, but at this point, no.
And as far as the movement, what kind of movement is this? Is it significant?
It is significant, I think, for it occurring in a home.
And can you explain what that movement was?
Correct. So at 3:08, there's movement on the phone, or on a device is connected to that phone is moving, and it moves. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but I believe it's several feet. I do know that at some point there was two movements right before the 911 call, and they're both significant. One was about 240 feet, it's like 74 meters and change, and the other one was about 130 feet. And this is right before the 911 call.
Okay, thank you. As you were analyzing the forensic data from that extraction, were you able to observe any noticeable patterns of deletion from that phone?
It appears that there is some deletion in that device.
Okay, and can you describe what is being deleted in that phone?
It looks like there's gaps in things like web history, web searches, particularly the call log. When a person receives a call or a text, those are recorded in the call log of the phone. And there are texts there's messaging That is included in the carrier report that I would expect to see also logged within the device that are not in the device.
Okay, so you're seeing those in the carrier records, but not on the device themselves.
Multiple calls and texts to an individual, I would expect to also see the call log of the device itself. And in a lot of instances, particularly to there's a lot of that is missing.
And from the carrier records, are you able to tell who those calls were going to?
Yes,
Who was that?
there are several people, but as it relates, one that stood out was just that has been mentioned as CL.
In those carrier records, were there logs of calls made in January of 2022?
I don't recall January.
Did you analyze a forensic extraction of a second iPhone belonging to the defendant that was seized in May of 2023?
Yes.
When did activity?
The activity on that phone started shortly after her original phone was seized in April of 2022.
Were you able to observe internet searches on that phone?
Yes.
And did you a PowerPoint of some of those searches?
I did.
And just for the court and counsel's reference, this is docket item 141. Were you able to tell when those searches were done?
Yes.
How did you do that?
There is a date and time stamp of the history, the web history. So for instance, if you visit a website and you click through it using your device, it will report what date and time that did that connected to that website.
I see. On April 18th of 2022, internet site of an article entitled "What Happens to Deleted Messages." On May 10th of 2022, did that phone access a site for an article entitled "How Do Police and Forensic Analysts Recover Deleted Data from Phones"?
Yes.
Did that phone was a query placed in that phone, quote, "Can cops, period, uncover deleted, period, messages, iPhone," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "How to, period, permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "Luxuries for the rich in America"?
It did.
Did that phone search, quote, "If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as," close quote?
Yes.
Were you able to tell when those things were searched?
The search themselves, there was no date and time reported for the individual search. However, I found corresponding websites to those searches that did have the web history.
And was there a certain time frame that these searches were made? Can you describe what that was?
It was typically between, well, shortly after her original phone was seized. So from middle of April of 2022 through, memory serves me right, about August of 2022 off and on.
Thank you. Now you mentioned your training with cell phone mapping using cell tower data.
Yes.
Have you implemented in your review of the evidence in this case?
I have.
Can you explain just briefly cell phone mapping is done using cell phone cell tower data?
Sure. Sorry, I look that way. I'm used to talking to a jury. So it's mapping is accomplished by taking call detail records that contain tower location in them and putting them into a piece of software that will visually show you a location on a map of which tower that device was accessing when it made or received a call or a text. So it takes lines of data and creates a map out of it.
Okay. And is that plotted on like a program like Google Earth?
It is.
Okay. And are you able to tell from when a phone connects to a tower? Is there any directionality to that, approximately where that phone is transmitting from?
Yes. Yeah. So the cell phone, the companies report which tower the device is utilizing and which is an estimated range to that, which is a bit ambiguous. However, it will tell us at least what side of the tower that the device was located when it made or received the call.
How many sectors are there on each cell tower?
3.
Okay. And so if a phone is connecting to a tower through a certain sector, know that it's someplace where that's, for lack of a better word, broadcasting or collecting signals.
Yeah, so we can determine the orientation of the device to certain locations.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you map data from CL's phone extraction?
I did.
Were you able to track that phone's movements on February 11th?
Yes.
At any time, was it at or near a Maverick gas station in Draper, Utah?
It is.
And are you aware of that location in this investigation?
I am. This is the location that CL had indicated to detectives that she bought drugs on behalf of the defendant.
Do you recall approximately what time of day that was? It was there?
She shows up on that tower near that Maverick at about 6:49 p.m. and remains there until about 8 p.m. 2022.
Does that phone make any calls or say well at that location?
It did.
And to anyone notable to this investigation?
Yes, 2 people.
Who was that?
One other acquaintance in which she had purchased the drugs from, and CL was also texting with the defendant.
While she was at a gas station in Draper, narcotics.
Correct.
On that day, did the phone go to a location in Heber City?
It did.
Was the mapping that you did CL's phone consistent with what CL gave to law enforcement regarding that first drug purchase?
Yes.
Were you able to track CL's phone movements on March 9th of 2022?
Yes.
In Francis, Utah on that day?
It was.
Was it ever at or near the same Maverick in? Were there any communications from the phone at that time while it was at the Maverick?
Yes.
Did it communicate belonging to a person relevant to this investigation?
It did.
Who was that?
At the Maverick, it communicated with, I guess, corroborating witnesses to the drug purchase on the 9th. When the device was utilizing it in Francis, it was about mid-9th, and CL's phone was in communication with the defendant's phone.
Utah.
Correct.
Did the phone go to a location in Midway, Utah on or about that day?
Yes.
Are the movements that you for CL's cell phone on March 9th of 2022 consistent with the information she gave to law enforcement in this investigation? Finally, I want to speak with you briefly about Mr. Eric Richins' phone. Did you analyze a forensic extraction?
I did.
When was the last use recorded from Eric's phone?
From memory, I believe it was PM on March 3rd, 2022.
And are the times that are on the extract populated in the Celebrite download, are those, what time zone are those given in?
Typically, the extraction is provided 0.
And so do you have to, so can you just briefly explain what UTC 0 is?
Right, so UTC 0 is Greenwich Mean Time. It's an effort by utilize investigations to try and keep everybody on the same time zone. Utah is in -7 daylight time, and we are in -6 in daylight savings time. So in this case, from November of 2022 to about March 13th, I'm sorry, November of 2021, March 13th, 2022, in Utah.
Okay. So if those times are given on that download as UTC -5, that would be
Correct. They would be 2 hours ahead of local.
so to adjust for Mountain Standard Time, you would have to go back 2 hours.
You'd have to subtract 2 hours.
Okay. And that's what gave you, can you repeat that the last time that Eric's phone was used on March 3rd?
I believe it was 9:58 p.m. on March 3rd.
Okay. I just have one. Thank you, Mr. Kotrodemus. At this time, thank you.
Just
You testified there are essentially two explanations for why things might be missing. One in a download. One is that it's not captured in the In this case, all you can say definitively is that it's missing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, with regard to movement, that could be any device that is attached to the phone through an app, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And so you can't say, looking at what you analyzed, exactly what device that was, correct?
So far, no.
Okay. And you can't tell where that device was in terms of location, correct?
Correct.
So it's possible that that could have been a device attached from some other location, but the phone's recording it, correct? But it's possible if it's connected to an app.
It depends.
Okay.
So it would be impossible outside a certain range.
Okay. And there's a number of different ways to, or I am not an expert in this, so there's programs or extractions that can be done on phones, correct? Or different. Did you perform an independent extraction on this phone?
I did not.
Okay, or on any of the phones you've talked about today?
No.
Did you analyze any data prior to January of 2022 on either CL's phone or either phone, or I guess the first phone belonging to Ms. Richins?
I don't believe I did.
Okay, were you asked at a,
Not necessarily, no.
okay, were you range of interest? Okay. And so you didn't cross-reference any communication or communication between CL and Kouri prior to January of 2022, correct?
Correct.
So could be that they communicated all the time, you wouldn't have known.
Yes.
So this is just a connection between the two. Were you made aware of when warrant was, or when the first phone was seized?
Yes.
Okay. Copy of the search?
No.
Okay. Were you made aware that the warrant included evidence of homicide that they were looking at?
No.
And in that first phone, prior to Eric passing away, were you able to review any search of the web browser?
Of whose device?
First device.
Of
Ms.
Ms. Reed, yes, yes.
Okay. And did you was related to fentanyl on that?
Not that I found it. There were available to
And
look at.
okay. No searches related to prisons either?
No, not in that time frame.
No searches related to deleting messages?
No.
And so all the searches came from the second phone, correct?
The web searches mentioned, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And phone that was issued for the first phone, correct?
That was, yes.
Because that's the
So
phone
that
she
was-
got as a replacement, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I just want to return to mapping that you discussed. Did you look at the mapping on the second phone of Ms. Richins?
I did not.
So to compare Ms. Richins' phone to CL's location at any point, correct?
They did.
Okay,
Yes. They
but you
did.
couldn't do it? Or didn't do it?
The records, the mapping location for those call detail records through Verizon are no longer available
On the second phone?
on either phone.
Okay, so you were able to get them off of CL's phone, but because of Verizon, you weren't able to Ms. Richins' phone?
Correct.
And on that March 9th date, you discussed midday, Maverick, time, was she at that Maverick?
It was about or 3
Then
p.m.
After,
She was
To Francis.
she was in Francis around midday. She was at the Maverick at about 2:33 p.m.
okay. Did she go back to Francis?
She went to Heber.
Okay. And she lives in here? I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, anything further?
No, thank you.
So you can step down. Thank you. Ms. Cassell.
Yes, Your Honor. Statement called Brooke Carrington.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, pains and penalties of perjury?
Morning.
Morning.
Could you could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
Brooke Carrington, Karrington.
How-
I am a principal managing partner at Financial Forensics.
Is this a company that you started?
Yes, it is.
And when did you do that?
Officially in, I think, 2012. that business, but I for about 35 years.
What's the nature of your business?
I look at most I get is forensic accounting, and this work is cases where there are allegations of fraud or missing or misappropriated funds of bank transactions and casework like that.
And how long have you been doing that?
35 years next month.
Do you have an undergraduate degree?
I do.
What is it in? And what about a graduate degree?
I have an MBA.
Or
I also am qualified in anti-money laundering transactions, looking towards in blockchain and cryptocurrency.
So this is probably going to be a lot, but in your 35 years of forensic accounting, how many cases have you worked on?
A couple of years ago, I had to quantify that, and at that time, it was about 4,600.
So probably more now.
More now.
Okay. Have you provided testimony in financial crimes cases?
Yes, I have.
How often?
A handful of times per year, I would say.
Okay. How did you first get involved in this case?
I was originally contacted by the investigator for the estate of Eric Richins.
And who's that?
Todd Gabler.
Okay. Why did he contact you, or what was his reason for contacting you?
Mr. Gabler and I and colleagues for 30 years, and he expressed to me that I have a skill set that he knows nothing about. So.
Okay. And who hired you?
The estate hired me initially.
Okay. And at some point, were you retained by the?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was May 31st of this year, just a couple weeks ago.
Okay. So as part of your being hired by the estate and being retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office, have you documents that are relevant in this case?
Yes.
What have you reviewed?
I've reviewed bank account statements, tax return documents, real property records, specifically trust deeds and warranty deeds, reconveyances. I've also reviewed insurance policies, tax information.
Okay. Specifically with respect to business that she owned.
She owns several businesses, and the most, I believe, is Kouri Richins Realty.
Okay. What kind of business is that?
It's in the business, in the realty business, real estate business, and she flips homes, but she also acts as a realtor representing people who are purchasing.
Okay. And when did she start this business?
It was registered in Utah in April of 2019.
All right. Were you able to find information regarding the defendant of homes?
Yes.
And how did you find that information out?
Those documents are typically recorded, and they are public documents, and they're typically at counties, recorder offices. There's also information along that line at the assessor offices, and each state has a little bit different process of doing them. Most of them Utah does, which is through the county recorder.
Okay. I'm going to show you, if I may approach you, what's been marked as State's Exhibit 2. You recognize that?
Yes. Schedule that I prepared. I use the term schedule to talk about my work product and the analysis and how I depict it. So this is a chronology of the real properties that I was able to identify attached to either Kouri personal, Ms. Richins personally, or through her company.
Okay. Does it show a timeline of acquisitions that she has made?
Yes, and I should underscore this is a timeline of that they were acquired.
Okay,
So just this is the front end of her ownership.
okay. And in 2019, and this is when her business was started, is that correct?
That's correct.
How many homes so far have you been able to tell whether or not, were a defendant?
In 2019?
Yes.
In 2019, 2 properties listed. One of them is the home that they were living in, and that's when the HELOC was taken out. And the other one is a different property. So I've listed.
And you've listed an amount of trust deeds for 2019, is that right?
That's correct.
Can you explain what those are?
Trust deeds are deeds that are recorded at the county recorder's office, are memorializing or documenting an obligation or an encumbrance on a property. So this a certain amount, and that's expressed and documented in a trust deed.
Okay. Money, I guess, what was the amount of the trust deeds in 2000?
Those 2 trust deeds total $471,210.48.
And you've done that for 2020 and 2021 as well, right?
That's correct.
And what was the amount in 2020 of trust deeds?
2020 was $2,069,280.
On how? Okay, and 2021, what was the amount of trustees and that the defendant acquired?
The amount there is $6,260,458.
On how many properties?
On 13.
Do you find this significant?
Yes. On a positive note, it depicts that the business was growing and she was actively acquiring properties. I think it's noteworthy, and it's an indication that things were growing quite significantly, and sometimes that is problematic.
And why is it problematic?
Well, it's kind of a basic thing, like in business school, where growth too strong, too is challenging for a business.
Okay. Were you able to determine at the end of 2021 how much the defendant was obligated on those debts, those $6 million debts? And actually explain to me the difference. What does obligated on a debt mean?
That's a very important question and very, very important point to understand here. I don't have access to the documents that tell me the terms of these loans. So I don't know what the interest rate is of these loans. I don't know the terms that she's agreed to for these loans. I don't know what payment is required on these loans. What I do know is these are what we colloquially call hard money lenders. And I do know on some of these what these lenders do require, and it's in the neighborhood of 12 to 15%. These are not conventional loans where there's a 30-year payment amortization. These are typically short-term loans, and the house flipping business, the fix and flip business, typically are turning those over a little, so they don't need a 30-year loan. They need a shorter-term loan. So I understand what we're obligated on, but I do not know what the balance is at the end of a particular time period.
I see. You need more to make that determination. Is that right?
That's correct. And that would be the loan documents themselves, the promissory notes, and the ledger from the lenders to show what payments were or were not made and how the interest was related in Other fees, typically these lenders have significant loan origination fees. And if payments are late, then the interest rate is higher on the late payment, perhaps default fees, things like that.
Okay. So do you have a rough estimate on what she was obligated to at the end of 2021?
Yes.
And what's that?
At the end of 2021, it's a little over $4 million.
Okay. And you don't know if that's you don't know what she had paid back, but you know that was what at that point she was obligated.
That's was obligated on that she still owned at that time. And this is, I believe I've done a pretty good job looking for property that I don't know about.
Okay. To bank accounts that belonged to the defendant.
Yes.
And what is servicing a debt? What does that mean?
That would be a term that would explain that there is a debt outstanding and service would be the payments on that. If I have a credit card and I have a monthly payment or I have a balance due, my payment toward that credit card is called servicing my debt.
Okay. And were you able to determine which debt the defendant was servicing in December of 2021, for instance?
Yes.
How much was that?
The debt payments were about $252,000 in that month. The debt payments that she made in 21, there were 4 payments, and those 94 payments totaled $252,000.
Is there anything that you found significant about those debt payments?
Yes.
What was that?
They were not to 94 individual entities. Some of them were weekly payments. For example, I know that she has an outstanding debt during that time of $5,438 that was required to be paid weekly on a debt. She has a $600 payment that is made daily for a period of time during December. And on most of those debts, the large majority of those debts are others. Some of them are credit cards.
And this was in an account you looked at.
That's
correct?
just in one account, yes.
And do you remember what account that was?
That's the account 6577.
Okay. Were you able to determine current payments that were coming out of 6577? Did I say that number correct? Yes.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
I know of one account that she has that had sued her, and they filed suit in New York in December 9th of 2021.
Okay. But, to ask you about that, I will ask you about that one in a minute. But
Okay.
were you able to look at the bank account and determine whether or not she was current on her payments or whether her payments were going through correctly?
If she was current on her payments, I can say about those payments that several of them did not clear the bank. And
Why was that?
she was in the negative in that account for a good part of that month. She was $22,000 in the hole for a good part of that month.
So you noticed that at least for that account in that month that some of the payments to the hard money lenders were not going through?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you notice any charges for overdraft fees or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what did you notice about that?
They were $25 each, and sorry, I don't recall what the cumulative number is for that, but there were dozens.
Okay. Now I want to ask you, you said that there was a lawsuit that you were familiar with out of New York.
Yes.
Can you explain what you found out about that?
So in that case, they did file the agreement. And so from that, it's that Ms. Richins used receivables of $87,000 are her potential revenue. It's performed or earned, and she's expecting to her company as revenues. So that's $87,000 that's stated in the case, in the document that they filed with it. And that agreement also says that she's borrowing $60,000 against that $87,000 at 15%. So spells out the terms of the she's to make weekly payments of $5,438 is paid.
Do you know lawsuit was brought, or what the document about why the lawsuit was brought?
According to the complaint, which is the other side's version of what happened, that she made payments of about $1,000. So that would be a little shy of 4 payments. And then after that, she defaulted.
Okay. And when was that lawsuit filed?
December 9th, 2021.
So we talked a little bit about the bank account. Do you know where the Kouri Richins Realty bank account, what the bank is?
Where they banked?
Where they banked?
Yes.
What is that?
America First Credit Union.
Okay. And were there America First Credit Union accounts that you were able to look at?
Yes.
And when were you able to look at them?
Over this past.
Okay. How many accounts did you get access to?
12.
Okay. Were some significant?
Yes.
Were some not?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask you specifically about each of these in order. Not each of them, but a couple of them in order. There's the 6577, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was the Kouri Richins Realty, right?
That account, and that's, as far as I can tell, that's primarily the transactions were housed.
And you said primarily the lending payments?
Primarily there.
Okay. And that one ended up in negative 2,200.
22,000.
22,000. That's, I'm sorry, you're right, 22,000. Did you look at 2204?
Yes.
What primarily was that?
That's the joint account. So we would call that a personal account. It's a joint account. It's held jointly with Eric and Kouri Richins.
Anything account to you?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, it's important to me to look at of the account leading up to a significant. Important to understand the nature of an account. And so 2020, long before the period that's relevant specifically in this case, or that is people are concerned about, to understand what the nature is, the character of that account, how is it used, and what's typical for a particular account holder. It may be different for every person and every. I looked at this account, and typically is account that is used to pay credit cards and kids' expenses and family expenses. That.
Okay. As you reviewed the account?
Yes, as we get to the time period that's relevant here, which is like the months leading up to Eric's death, I would term that, and then what happened after. There's between accounts and amongst accounts. I I can see, Eric's payroll coming into that account. I can see there are some deposits from, or transfers, I guess should say, from Kouri Richins Realty, payments going back to Kouri Richins Realty. There's marked increase in the number of transactions that occur in the account and all of.
Okay, so you actually around in that account, say, late 20. Why is that significant? Why do you find that significant?
Well, I'm looking for what's typical or what makes sense. And so I'm looking at, what's happening in the business account, and does that influence what happens in the personal account? Happening in the acquisition of properties and how those move together. And so there's this crescendo that happens in the months leading up to Eric's death. There are indicators of an increase of accounts.
Positive way or a negative way?
It feels as though there's not a pattern, there's not a practice that there had been a little bit earlier in my review. And there are transactions that don't clear when there's, money is moving around just to cover transactions.
Those transactions that don't clear in a minute. But I'm going to go to ask you, 4. Are you familiar?
Yes.
What is that account?
That is also a personal account. That was opened in 2013. And the header on the bank statement has Kouri's name, but the signature card, and until I looked at the signature card, I thought that was just Kouri's account, but the signature and Kouri as a joint.
And what is that?
I thought that was a business account.
Okay, is that what you continue to think?
Personal account.
Okay.
According to America First, that's a personal account, but it is used as a business account.
Why do you say that?
Because of the transactions that are contained within the account.
What kind of transactions are they?
There are some payments for the loans on these. There are expenses would be typical of a business rental. I'm not saying to be prejudicial or negative or anything. It just.
Are there any credit card payments coming out of that account?
Yes.
How many credit card payments coming out of that account? At the end of did you review the bank statement for that account for the end of 2021?
Yes.
What was the status of the account?
Negative.
Line of credit?
Yes, there was.
How much was the line of credit?
$3,200.
And what was the status of the line of credit?
And that was exceeded.
Okay.
That was tapped out.
Mentioned some, I guess, transactions that did not clear. Is that how you put that? Do you remember?
I know the 6577 account, 5244. The 5244 is the one we've just been talking about.
Mhm.
The two October 23rd of 2021.
13th.
Yes,
Okay. Tell me, and that was into 6577. Is that right? That's
I believe so. Are we talking about 2021?
yes.
Okay.
And it was from Penn Fed. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me about that? Do you recall about that transaction?
Penn Fed Credit Union is a credit union where Kouri Richins has accounts, and that becomes a significant issue later. But that check was deposited into the account, and then it turned unpaid.
And do you recall if there were any transactions made out of the account between the time the check was deposited and it came back unpaid?
There were transactions, yes.
Okay. And there was another couple of checks were deposited in November that did not clear. Do you remember?
Remember that there were checks, yes.
Okay. Checks were deposited. Do you remember if there were any payments made out? Transferred to, or where they were transferred?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Okay. But there was money transferred out between the time the check was deposited that didn't clear and the time it, okay. And then in December of 2021, any checks that were deposited, a check for $10,000 and from the Navy Federal Credit Union.
Yes.
And what happened to that check?
That did not clear as well.
Okay. And checks take a while not to clear, right? Is that it's credited to time in between the credit and the coming back not cleared. Is that right?
Yes, but it depends on the relationships between those financial institutions. Sometimes they'll clear, sometimes they'll take a few days.
Now, these 5 days, would that be?
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
I remember that there were two that did not clear, and they both came from Ms. Richins' Navy Federal Credit Union account.
So these were by the on the Navy Federal Credit Union account and deposited into her.
That's correct.
That didn't. Was there money time that the check was deposited and the time it came as unpaid? Were there any transactions out of 6577 account?
Yes, there were.
Were they?
I-
But there was a time when the money.
That's correct.
In 657, do you recall? I know you tested overdrawn at the end of the year. Do you recall if it was overdrawn again prior to Eric's death?
I do. I don't remember the amount, but it was
Overdrawn.
yes.
Do you? And again, I want to back to 5244. And I think.
So I think we can move on.
Okay. Let me ask you about the life insurance policies. Are you familiar with life insurance policies
Yes.
on Eric's life?
Yes.
How many life insurance policies were there on Eric's life at the time of his death?
I believe there were 6.
Okay. And
7.
who, I mean, what were those policies were?
Yes. The first was through Minnesota Life for $347,000. And that was what is typically called the home mortgage policy, in which if the insured passes away, the home's paid off. And they write it at the amount of what the loan balance was at the time the policy is taken out. And so whatever the loan is at the time of death, I believe that loan is like 72%. They'll pay 72% of the outstanding loan. And so that one was paid.
Okay, and
then there's a life insurance policy that Eric and his business partner had on each other, basically, and that's in coordination with a buy-sell agreement on their business. And so if one of them passes away, the other would be the beneficiary of that life insurance policy.
let me just ask you about that instead of going through one at a time. How, besides the life insurance that was on Eric's business, what was the amount of money that Eric's life was insured for at the time of his death?
About $1.2 million, aside from the business buy-sell policy.
And are you familiar with any attempt to change the beneficiary of the business policy?
I'm aware that that is the report, yes.
And what was the report?
That on New Year's Day of 2022, that in New York Life's online portal, someone had logged in and had changed the beneficiaries on that policy
To
Richins.
okay. And that was changed back, as far as you know, had been changed back at the time of Eric's death?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Do you know how much money the defendant got in insurance payouts?
$1.3 million, a little bit more than that, $1.3 million in June of 2022.
Okay. Can I just have a minute, Your Honor?
Of course.
I have a couple more questions, Your Honor. Were you able to review the PenFed accounts at any time?
Yes.
Do you recall what was any money in those accounts?
For most of the time, I reviewed a little bit over a year. I believe most of the time it had $5 in it.
Okay. Right. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
I'm going to be really quick because
Well, hey, this takes what it takes.
Okay.
They're on notice that I'm otherwise engaged now.
Okay. I needed that. Ms. Carrington, a couple questions. I want to talk about, pursuant to your testimony, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yes.
And you look at investment type businesses as well as personal finances, correct?
That's
as
correct.
the course of your review of things. And you said that Kouri Richins Realty was essentially flipping homes, correct? As a business.
That's my understanding from what's publicly available. Yeah.
And in your experience, that type of a business model is essentially these that you don't own very long and then you resell, correct?
Yes.
So within the framework of that, it would not be uncommon or uncharacteristic to have these hard money lenders as a part of that type of business model, correct?
Yes, and that I did say earlier
Okay.
that that's typical.
Right.
Yes.
We wouldn't go get conventional home loans for a home we're going to own for, 6 months, we hope, correct?
You could. That would be a lot lower interest rate. even though it had a longer repayment period, someone could get a conventional loan to do that.
It would be hard to continue to get conventional loans, I would assume, when you're buying multiple properties, correct?
I don't know the answer to that. What I will say is it's very typical for someone in this industry that Ms. Richins is in to get hard money lenders.
So what she was doing was typical for the industry.
I would say yes.
Okay. And you created this schedule of homes. Did you also look at when those homes sold?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you correlate those payments?
Correlate.
Like, were you able to see what the homes sold for?
I have been able to see many of them, what they sold for.
Okay. So, and then if you look at those, she only still owns a handful of those, correct? Like 4, maybe 5.
I'm sorry, what?
She only
period?
still currently owns just a small handful of those homes, correct?
I think she still owns about 6 or 8.
So she owns the ones on Canyons Resort Drive that are rental properties.
That's correct.
Okay. And she owns the Saratoga Springs house.
Yes.
Okay. And
She still owns the condo in B Street in Salt Lake City.
Correct, in the Heber City.
Yes, she does. It's under joint tenancy, and K. Richins Realty is still on the title on that.
And were you able to see on any of these hard money loans if she partnered with anyone on them? It's not just a hard money loan, but if there were any partnership.
The trust deeds do not indicate a partnership.
Okay, so you wouldn't know if there was some other partnership that existed on.
Yes, that would be reflected in the trust deed, and I did not see any partnership on any of them.
Were you able to see what the balance in the 2204 account as part of your review of?
At what time period?
At any time period. Did you look at the 2204
I did.
account
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
And although there were fluctuations in her business account, that account always had sufficient funds in it, correct?
That's not correct.
Okay. There was a period of time where it did not.
There are periods of time.
Okay.
Yes.
And you also said that Eric was on this 5244 account that was being used for essentially business type. That was Kouri's business, not Eric's. Is that correct?
You're asking me a couple of things.
Okay, sorry, I'll slow down.
That's
on the
okay. No,
account.
it's fine. It's fine. He's on the signature card. So
Okay.
when an account is opened, he signed as an authorized signer. She signed as an authorized signer.
Okay.
As
So
I-
he would have, as an authorized signer, he would have access if he wanted to go review what that account was doing, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That all depends on how it's set up with the online access. Just because someone's an authorized signer doesn't mean that they can come in and walk into the bank and get any information they want.
Were you able to tell in this case?
Well, as I said, the bank statement does not say Eric and Kouri Richins. It says Kouri Richins. And looking at the transactions in the account before I looked at the signature card, it looked very much like a business account that Kouri would have.
Okay. And are you aware that Eric was in the stonemasonry business, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so he was, on some level, assisting her in the remodel or cleanup of some of these homes, correct?
That is not how I would term it.
I'm not saying financially. Are you aware that he was doing work on these homes?
I'm aware of an instance on the Franson Lane home in which he and Cody contributed about $133,000 toward the completion of the home. And my understanding is different than how you're portraying.
Okay. I don't know.
Thank you.
Your Honor, before we rest, we would ask that this be marked as State's Exhibit.
2 has not been admitted.
No, well, we would, I think she was just using that as a demonstrative.
Okay, that's fine.
We would ask that this be marked as State's Exhibit 3. This is the transcript of the jail call from May 8th.
Okay. Thank you. Brittany, will you put 3 on that? Ms. Lazaro, any objection to admission of State's Exhibit 3 solely for the purpose of this detention here?
Not necessarily, I mean, only to the extent that I have not been provided a copy of any of the jail phone calls that I could find last night when I was searching.
Do you have any of the audio?
No, that have been provided in discovery. So.
All right.
I don't know what to do with that.
Well,
So I guess,
out of
yes,
fundamental
I would object.
fairness for the defendant, and without having to address the need to postpone or continue this detention hearing, I am not going to consider that phone call. State's Exhibit 1 is in. State's Exhibit 3, for the purposes of this detention hearing, is not.
Okay.
Okay.
And Your Honor, we have no further witnesses. However, we do have a victim impact statement from the victim representative.
And if you could just name that person for us.
That's Amy Richins.
Amy, if you don't mind stepping forward to the podium. Good morning. Go ahead.
Dear Judge Mrazek, I'm here today to represent my brother, Eric Eugene Richins, whose life was taken in a senseless act of poisoning on March 3rd, 2022. His wife, the defendant, has been accused of committing this crime. If she is found guilty, she has committed the ultimate act of betrayal. Eric is gone, and I am brokenhearted. He was my best friend and protector. The feeling of loss is so great it is visceral. And with the sorrow comes a wave of panic at not being able to see him again. I can never talk to him, never hug him again, and never more be a part of his life. Eric's world revolved around his family, his love for hunting, the family cattle ranch, and his intense drive as a successful entrepreneur. Being born into the Richins legacy shaped Eric's formative years and resulted in a lifetime of hard work, dedication, and fierce loyalty. At an early age, Eric learned the joys of keeping horses and cows around. He spent countless hours at work the ranch, hauling hay, feeding the animals, and mending fences. He loved our family unconditionally and was a devoted son, brother, uncle, and father. Eric was a family man who always strove to be the absolute best father and husband. He was an attentive and loving father to his 3 sons and a devoted husband to his wife of almost 9 years, Kouri, the defendant. Eric did absolutely everything in his power to provide his family and his 3 sons with every possible grow and have fun. He was the coach or assistant coach on all his boys' teams, which included soccer, basketball, and baseball. He spent countless hours coaching and teaching the boys to play aggressive and give it their all. Eric truly cared about every single child he coached and wanted the absolute best for all of them. There was never a dull moment when you were around Eric, whether it was him showing up to a family dinner with no socks or because he had to make an emergency bathroom stop along the way, or his calling to tell you he rolled the 4-wheeler for the upteenth time is stuck and he needs you to come get him. It was never boring. Eric loved to have fun and always wanted to make sure everyone else did as well. He owned almost every motorized toy possible, from 4-wheelers and side-by-sides to trucks and snowmobiles, and was so excited to share those with his sons. He had the perfect combination of business sense and foresight. He built a very successful masonry business from the ground up and helped many friends do the same. He had a special ability to build close relationships with everyone he worked with, which really allowed his business to thrive. Eric loved every aspect of his job, but most of all, he loved the people he worked for. Eric faithfully supported organizations that he truly believed in. He never was one that wanted recognition or accolades. He did most things anonymously and without recognition. Eric was a true champion of all. It did not matter if you were an employee, friend, family, or the next random person walking down the street. If you needed anything, you could count on him. He truly cared about each person he met. Eric loved fully, laughed loudly, and lived life. He enjoyed great adventures to far-off places, but also cherished the small and finer things in life. No obstacle was too great for Eric. He simply viewed each one as a challenge. No peak was too high, and the next adventure was always just around the next bend. Words cannot describe the loneliness and loss that is felt in every heart that was lucky enough to know him. Eric was such an inspiration and role model for us all. His loss has created a Grand Canyon-sized hole in this community. Except instead of taking millions of years to slowly form, our worlds change overnight. His 3 boys' entire worlds and their perspectives on life changed. None of our lives will ever be the same. Eric died under horrendous circumstances. I am tormented at the thought of what he endured. I play it out in my mind. I go through the terrible sequence of events. I wonder when he realized he was in mortal danger. May have said to him in his last moments. How long was he conscious, knowing he would die? Where were Eric? Did they hear Eric's body fall to the ground? Did they catch a glimpse of their father taking his last breath? It's torture to think of. Why did Eric lose his life? Why did the boys lose their father? Was it because of Kouri's greed and desire to get life insurance and other assets? If so, that is abhorrent. How could anyone value human life so cheaply? I cannot comprehend it. I'm overflowing with grief and pain at the thought that Eric meant so little to her. If Eric had died because of an illness, he would have been cared for. He could have looked after him and been with him. If he had died because of an accident, people would have tried to help. There would have been kindness. But there's to be had here. There's no concern. In his last moments, after being intentionally poisoned, he was faced with betrayal and terror. The thought of it is unbearable. I am haunted by the horror of it. It has been a living hell for our family. We have watched as Kouri has paraded around portraying herself as a grieving widow and victim while trying to profit from the death of my brother. Both by trying to profit from a book about his death and trying to get life insurance and assets that should go exactly where Eric wanted them to his boys. Immediately killed, Kouri told us she could not help us get anything ready for the funeral as she was too distraught with grief. We shortly found out that was not true at all. In fact, she pulled herself to go close on the purchase of a $2 million home, hire a real estate agent, hire an architect to create CAD drawings of the home, hire a lawyer in order to file a lawsuit on Eric's trust, hire a locksmith to come break into and clean out my brother's safe, and attempt to have Eric cremated. She mustered up the strength and resolve to do most of this within 48 hours of his death. Kouri assaulted me. I will never forget the look in her eyes when she attacked me that Sunday morning. It was early and had been snowing most of the night. I was just getting ready to leave and heading out to the car when I saw a locksmith in Eric's detached garage starting to drill out his gun safe. I asked Kouri multiple times why we could not just call my dad for the code. I could not understand why she was breaking into and ruining Eric's safe. To this, she screamed at me at the top of her lungs, called me some inappropriate things I cannot share with you here, and then told me to get out of her house. It was then that I told her that she could not kick me out of my brother's house. My sister, Katie, was now the executor of Eric's trust and estate, and just like Eric, she would not want the defendant breaking into his gun safe. Kouri looked at me with pure hatred and rage. I was messing up her plan, I was getting in her way, and because of that, she attacked me multiple times. It took 4 people to pull her off me that day. Before the funeral, Kouri opened a bank account and asked everyone that was grieving to send her money instead of sending the family cards and flowers. 2 weeks after Eric's passing, that we were told she had taken down my brother and removed all his clothing from the house. Kouri put together a golf tournament in Eric's name 2 months after his death on what would have been his 40th birthday, and told his family, all of us, that we were not allowed to attend. Since Eric's death, it has come to our attention that Kouri took out multiple life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge. It appears that she forged his signature on various documents, assigned herself as Eric's durable power of attorney, inappropriately diverted money from his business to herself, and assigned herself as beneficiary of Eric's portion of our mother's retirement account. I should also not forget to mention the multiple life insurances she has taken out on the boys. Her most recent business venture was authoring a children's book about how to help grieving children cope with the loss of the death of a parent. In this book, she had the audacity to use the boys' real names and even use their last family portrait. Her behavior gives me great concern, as she has exploited the boys for money and will likely do so again. In addition, Kouri has weaponized Eric's children, manipulating my dad to do or not do things by threatening to cut him out of their lives if he did not capitulate to her demands. She similarly deprived the boys of contact with myself, my sister, and her daughters, unless we agreed to give her the money in Eric's trust. Money that Eric wanted to go to his 3 children. As if that were not enough, I have been told that Kouri started telling their 3 little boys that none of Eric's family or friends loved them. She apparently told them none of us cared for them or wanted to be around them, even though that is the exact opposite of what was happening. We all want nothing more than to be there for those 3 little boys, my nephews. Yet Kouri has made sure to cut us out of every aspect of their lives. This is all just a brief summary and the start of what our family has been through over the last year. We have scarcely gone a day without finding out some new allegations or evidence regarding something Kouri appears to have maliciously done to attack and undermine my brother, his 3 little boys, and our family. We have all been there since the beginning of Kouri's and Eric's relationship. I was there on one of their first dates. We were there at the wedding. We were there when each of the boys were born. We have been there for every birthday party, school graduation, and rodeo. We welcomed her into our family and treated her as one of us. Not only did she betray our brother, it feels as though she has murdered and taken away a part of our souls as well. Because of her actions, there has not been a day that has gone by we have not lived with paralyzing anxiety and fear, worrying for the boys' lives as well as our own. I may be naive, but I never knew evil like this existed. I was in fact willing to kill Eric for money. Who's to say that what she will not do? Who would be next? Kouri was in a desperate financial situation when Eric was killed, and that situation seems even worse now. We understand that she has defaulted on loans and is already a defendant in other lawsuits based on her financial misdeeds. I am truly concerned that she will stop at nothing to dig her way out of the problems, including murder. She seems devoid of moral sensibility, and there is no telling what she will do if she is released. Judge Mrazek, her fate lies in your hands. Please do not allow Kouri to use the fraudulent life insurance proceeds to get out on bail. That would be morally reprehensible. Please do not allow Kouri to take advantage and make a mockery of our justice and legal system anymore. She has done enough. Please do not allow Kouri to hurt Eric's memory, our family, friends, and community anymore. We have been through enough. Please do not give Kouri the opportunity to hurt Eric's 3 boys anymore. They have lost enough and have been through enough. Since Eric's death, we have learned and unfortunately are continually reminded that Kouri is desperate, greedy, and extremely manipulative. Out on bail, I will be afraid not only for my own life and those of all of my family, but most for the lives of Eric's 3 sons. Has already suffered enough. Please do not let Kouri out on bail where she will be a risk to do further harm. Please protect what Eric put his life on the line for, his 3 boys. Thank you.
Amy, thank you. Ms. Cassell?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Lazaro, is the defense calling any witnesses?
I am not. I guess what I'd like to do is just largely have the court review the briefing and the attached exhibits be submitted and considered as part of this, but I don't intend to put on any further evidence.
All right. Would you like an opportunity to make any closing argument for today, Ms. Lazaro?
Yes.
Why don't we have defense go first, and we'll just give the state the last word.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
I guess I'd start with whether or not the court has any specific issues they would like me to address.
No, I mean, candidly, there's a threshold legal issue here, right, that comes out of the briefing, and the state has been candid about the pending Barnett case. I listened to the oral arguments. I think the state is wise to request a ruling in the alternative, but I'm persuaded by the defendant's position that as a matter of law, while a defendant charged with a capital felony supported by substantial evidence does not have a right, they can nonetheless request bail, and the district court retains discretion, at least under the current status of the Utah Code, to consider the request. So fast forward past that.
I will do so. And don't necessarily disagree with what may or may come out of that case that's up on appeal.
Right.
With regard to the sufficiency of the evidence, I mean, we're here because of a really tragic circumstance, and I don't think any of us want to forget that. I mean, especially my client. She loved her kids, she loved her husband, but she's also charged now with his murder. And so I just don't necessarily want that to get lost on the court, that we understand the gravity of the situation. With regard to the evidence, I'm going to skip through most of it. I think the most important thing, if she poisoned him, is did she ever get it from CL? Was it ever requested from CL? I don't think the state has been able to draw that nexus. I don't disagree that CL was buying drugs. I think that's clear. She has a history of being a drug distributor. She was jammed with first-degree felonies. She had a potential federal case hanging over, and then when they look at her charge, pursuant to essentially the detective's testimony, is they walked her down the line, provided evidence to her, essentially right, and then she was released. When we look at the cell phone mapping, yes, we know she went and picked up a check. We know that she was cleaning houses. We know she cashed a check. We know she picked up drugs. But they can't put her anywhere in the same vicinity of Kouri's phone. Because apparently the mapping's not available from Verizon. And what somewhat surprises me, given it's Verizon.
I think it's a length of time between the events and the request.
Never had anybody with her when she dropped it off. There's nothing to make the most important correlation in this, and that's that it was ever provided to Kouri that there was no fentanyl or traces of fentanyl in the home anywhere. And I think that's significant. I think if she gotten 30 pills on at least 2 separate occasions, that's a
evidence that the glass is present?
Well, I didn't look for a glass, I guess is what I should say.
Okay.
So no glass was tested. So there's nothing to show. I mean, it very well could have. And I think that given the evidence presented today is a very plausible situation. With money does not make you a murderer. Being bad at murder. The other thing I think that's significant, money loans that she owed, at least, far exceeded life insurance policy. And so even getting the life insurance money was not going to solve Kouri's problems, not
it's and I think one of the things that we have that said is, you know, that she was primed and told what to say, but what really happened is she's, you know, a year later she's asked people that we have testified, and then just with the mapping, do we have her putting the drug and that was testified to. So we have the evidence that Kouri got, or the defendant got the drugs. We also have the evidence that corroborates all or most that were deleted. We have a great deal of information that was deleted, and that was deleted off of the defendant's phone. So I think that